Let's call the meeting to order. It's now exactly 9 a.m. Of course, we all know it's Oregon's birthday today. I believe it's number 165. Doesn't she look good? So, and it is Valentine's Day. So please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll begin by having citizen input. No, nothing. Does anyone have a raised hand? One? Okay. Ashley, good morning.
Morning, can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Thank you for joining us.
Hi. Okay. Hi, my name is Ashley Schreiber. I wanted to speak up in opposition again to the transitional housing program at 640 Wilson. I just wanted to give you an update on our change.org petition. The current number of signatures is about 1,020. Sorry, I actually forgot to look at that this morning. I have a comment that I want to share from an anonymous source that kind of shares our overall frustration. And I think a lot of people share this outlook. Over the last couple of years, I've seen the city head in the wrong direction. It appears 2024 is not off to a good start either. There have been 15 fires in and around homeless encampments since January 1st, and we are aware of the very real emergency state we are in with fentanyl. I'm worried for the safety of everyone. An electrician acquaintance of ours picked up a bag of trash next to a power pole 2 weeks ago while working and found himself waking up in the emergency room from a fentanyl overdose. We should all be afraid of the increasing risks. I supported the pushback against the South Bend encampment even though I live on the west side, because it doesn't matter where you're from. These issues are affecting all of us more and more each day. We are losing control to poor policy with little to no results. At this rate, it will lead to catastrophe. We are all watching in horror the things being done to our home. I am in awe of how poorly the Community Justice Department has handled the Wilson program. It's time to check the work being done on a regular basis. We demand transparency. We want real data. We require accountability. No more of this just deal with it mentality. I support the people responsible for bringing to light this issue on Wilson. I applaud the work they have put in. I hope this helps show the rest of our community it's time to unite for the future of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
Ashley, who did you say, are you still available? Who did you say picked up a trash bag and ended up, it was a fentanyl overdose?
Yeah, it was an electrician.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the name of the company.
Okay.
But it was
all right. Just, that just tells you, thank goodness he survived.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you. Have a good.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Is there anyone else on Stephen? Okay, Doreen, please join us. Doreen, you're still muted.
Good morning, commissioners. Happy Valentine's Day.
Yes, and the same to you.
Thank you. So I appreciate your desire to actually address public health with the opioid crisis by the emergency declaration. I'm very deeply concerned about how much power you give to a war on drugs, which has been very ineffective. I hope that you use this as a way of getting the people who are very predatory off our streets, which is part of, what happens with the homeless camps, and get the predators off our street. Thank you. Meanwhile, of course, the airport that you guys have approved so many changes without protection for any community protection have just been, the flight schools are retaliatory. They are vicious and they are very, very cruel. And you guys need to do something about it. And deferring to the FAA is the wrong answer because the FAA's only goal is to promote aviation. Of course, you wish to do something about all these crises, but you seem to regularly skip by cost in the cost benefit analysis when it comes to Bend Municipal Airport and the glut of torturous and toxic flight training in our region. Not to mention having your planning department do retreats there while making land use decisions. That was disgusting. And so about your emergency declaration, as of February 4th, the CDC said that there was about 120,000 overdose deaths in the country. There's around 40,000 deaths that they can prove from aviation a year, but that's just noise. What about the lead? And you're not lead testing kids. A study by Cincinnati Children's Hospital in 2006 found that exposure to just over 1 microgram leads to ADHD. Children who have had their IQ and their behavior altered by lead end up using drugs, end up doing crimes, end up in all kinds of situations. So please do a little preventative care. Take care of the lead pollution coming out of these airports and the toxic behavior. Thank you. Oh, by the way, there is a drop-in replacement. You don't have to change tanks, anything. There's a drop-in replacement. But Chevron and Shell don't want you to do it because it's not beneficial to them. Please look into the replacement and do it. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Doreen. Stephen, do we have anyone else? Okay, Tom. Good morning, Tom. And you're still muted, I believe.
There we go. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you for giving me some time here. I'm here to speak about the planned low barrier shelter for adult male parolees to include level 2 and 3 sex offenders at 640 Southeast Wilson Avenue in Bend. I'm a homeowner near Southeast 6th Street and Wilson Avenue. I'm part of a group of neighbors that has been looking into the proposed low barrier shelter that Deschutes County Community Justice, Adult Parole and Probation Division is attempting to place in our neighborhood. We've collected a lot of input from immediate neighbors, the general neighborhood, and the larger Bend community. We have not received a single message or comment in support of what is planned for that property. We have a change.org petition that as of this morning has 1,018 signatures against the facility. We have a website that outlines many problems we found with the facility, and it's had 1,216 unique visits since it launched 2 weeks ago. So a lot of eyes are on this. We continue our efforts to shine a light on. There are a lot of reasons why the plans for the property should change. I'm going to highlight 5. I'm going to go as quickly as I can here. I don't know what the time limit is. If I run out of time, please let me know.
You have 1 minute and 37 seconds left.
Oh, I don't have very much time at all. Okay, well, it's a triplex. There were 3 existing tenants that were removed. This is low-income rental units. That shouldn't have happened. You've displaced one housing challenged group to make room for a different housing challenge group. That's not making us any net headway in this issue that is trying to be addressed. The location is wrong. It's 586 feet to Kiwanis Park. It's 806 feet to Vince Guinness Stadium, which is also a Bend Parks and Recreation facility that's used year round. There's a field house there that houses many different activities. It's also right on the brand new Wilson Avenue improvements from Southeast 2nd all the way to 15th, which include bike lanes, dedicated bike lanes, multi-use path runs directly in front of the property. There was a lack of appropriate public outreach by Deschutes County. This is my 3rd point. It's well documented on our website. There was 45 minutes of public outreach per the documentation provided by the private contractor. There's a lot of discrepancies between that and what the neighborhood found out, and that's all well documented on the website. There's discrepancies between the grant application, which was approved by the board in 2023, and what is actually trying to be put into our neighborhood. Located site distance from close neighborhoods. The property will need to be more than 1,000 feet from schools, daycare, parks, it is likely that the neighborhood will be sparse and or remote, creating 111 new shelter beds, and the shelter is to be up and running by January 10th, 2024. This is what you approved in 2023 as a board. None of these criteria have been met by what community justice is attempting to do in our neighborhood. So there's something wrong there, and we need to get to the bottom of what happened. And we don't want the sorts of things to repeat with the next grant application. Also, the grant money is to be used exclusively to create a new low barrier shelter. Low barrier shelter has very specific rules around it. Sobriety and treatment are voluntary, no required documentation of identification, custody, citizenship, or gender. The requirement to abstain completely from alcohol and drug use is not a component of low barrier shelters. This is what the money is for. It's completely different than what community justice is attempting to do with the money. Again, something that we shouldn't be repeating, and we need to find out why we got to this point with this. We have solution. Yes.
Tom,
I'm out of
we
time.
do have, we are over our time, but what I would appreciate is if you would send an email in with your points this morning. That would be excellent. You can send it into citizen input if you would like, or to us individually, but we will see it.
Okay, and I did do that already, maybe 45 minutes ago. So you should
Okay.
have.
I saw it right before this meeting.
Okay.
And respectfully on your last point, I think or maybe your last 2 points, I think you are confusing some of the provisions for the overall governor's emergency order and funds, with this specific project. That the emergency order and program had both shelter provisions and homelessness prevention programs, and this was not submitted as a shelter project.
Okay, well, we're pulling that from the agreement between COIC and Deschutes County. And it does, I mean, my reading of it, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know. I may have missed something, but the document I got came from a public document request from Deschutes County for that agreement, and that's what I looked through. And it does specifically say low barrier shelter. So the COIC is saying that the state has told them the money is to be used for low barrier shelter. I could be wrong, and I'm fine. And if it's wrong, then we'll remove that particular bullet point.
You can, this is not the time for us to go back and forth, but this would be a good thing for you to discuss with our community justice department, the scope of the program that is being implemented, which is not a low barrier shelter. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Tom, for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Any further? Okay, Ryan. Ryan, welcome. Is he still there? There you are. Okay. Just need to have you unmuted, please.
Sorry for the delay. Clicked the wrong button at first, so I'm back. Greetings, commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Just on Phil's point regarding this not being a low barrier shelter, I spoke with the house manager, Kyle, yesterday, and there's currently 2 homeless individuals that have been cited there in shelter fashion. So there seems to be functionally a shelter component to this still. And that's from speaking with the house manager, Kyle, directly. And there have been issues already noted from the neighbors with one of these 2 individuals causing disturbances in the neighborhood. Just want to give a little background today, a bit of my story. I was born in St. Charles here in Bend in '92. I'm thankful for a wonderful childhood here in Central Oregon. But after 3 decades here, my parents recently moved away to Idaho, largely due to what they quoted as the downward spiral that our state and local government is in. I stayed back with my family with the belief that Central Oregon is still a good place to raise a family. And Central Oregon isn't too far gone yet. And maybe I can make a difference and keep it as a good place for people to raise families. Recent events have really led me to question this belief, as I see taxpayer money is increasingly used to prioritize criminals over hardworking, taxpaying, and law-abiding families. And I know I'm not the only person that is concerned about this trend. Our county, as you know, recently approved placement of a halfway house within 1,000 feet of two parks. 12 children live within 60 yards of this triplex, and this is designated for 10 to 15 felons or sex offenders at a time, 40 to 50 per year. I do understand that the Community Justice Department will do a good job screening, and I believe that most program participants will re-enter society positively. But the chance of one of these 40 to 50 per year reoffending and victimizing an innocent person in the neighborhood is not insignificant, and that is unacceptable. With so many issues to address as commissioners, it must be difficult to fully understand all the proposals put before you. In this case, many concerning details regarding the halfway house were sugar-coated and not forthrightly communicated to you before decision time. This decision was made based on a gross mischaracterization of the neighborhood's position regarding this proposal, as you can see from the 1,000+ signatures and many other comments. The upstanding thing to do when you make a mistake is not to defend it, but to acknowledge it and make things right. So we have 3 proposed solutions to make things right. 1, sell the property and return the grant money because the grant is in default due to several discrepancies, and this is taxpayer money. If the grant is found not to be in default, or that first option is not found to be feasible or in the county's best interest, then move this shelter, halfway house operation to a more suitable location and sell the property to fund the relocation. Or the third option would be to find other county money to move this shelter to another location and retain ownership of the property for use as a women and children's shelter, or to serve some other population in need of housing. I recently studied some of the property area, the Deschutes County property around the jail, the sheriff's office, the probation and parole department, and there's over 2 acres of unused land or underutilized land on that property. It's zoned light industrial and mixed employment, both of which allow shelters as a permitted use outright, thanks to city council. And there's also, this use could be also permitted as an urban dwelling site in the southern portion, south of Post Shoals Road. And I believe it's feasible to site this, and the cost could be similar to what was paid for the triplex or less. That would not pose adverse impacts to the neighborhoods in that area beyond what they already have, given the jail and people being released there and whatnot. It's right next to transit. There's a bus stop right there. It is possible to provide housing for parolees without adversely impacting the neighborhood. It is. So I ask you to consider these 3 options seriously and put this item back on the agenda for official consideration by the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for your testimony this morning.
Thank you.
Stephen, do we have anyone else? Okay. All right. Okay, I did mention earlier, I think Oregon is 165 years old today. So what an interesting, I wonder what Valentine's Day was 165 years ago. I can't imagine the difference. Let's go to our consent agenda.
Move approval of consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion? I did want to acknowledge that the number 1 item on our list, the High Desert Aggregate and Paving, I believe that company goes in and does the paving at our Veterans Village. So happy to see that they're getting one of these bids. They were successful in that, but they have been stepping up for the Veterans Village consistently the last couple of years. So thank you to them. Commissioner DeBonne.
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes. So item number 8, it's the Mountain View Community Development Redmond Safe Parking Lease. And then we have Christy. Thank you so much, Christy. And Rick, thanks for joining us.
Morning, Commissioners. For the record, Christy Bollinger, Deschutes County Property Management. We also have Rick and Heather, and I'll go ahead and have them introduce themselves.
Rick Russell, Executive Director of Mountain View Community Development.
Heather Ingolstader. I was part of the safe parking program.
Thanks for joining us.
So just real quickly, about a year ago, the board had approved a 1-year extension, a ground lease extension for use of county-owned property in Redmond for the safe parking program. And at that point, the board had requested that in about a year, Rick come back and provide a program update. And so he's here to do that. And we also have a PowerPoint. So Stephen, I hope that you have that loaded. Looks like that's good to go. So if you want to use that as arrows, or I can do it for you. With that, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, commissioners, it's good to be with you. I was thinking of who I'd like to spend Valentine's Day with, and 3 of you came to mind.
So we came right to the top of your list, I'm sure, Rick.
I thought I'd give you just a general update on the program. So we're currently operating at 7 locations. You can see on the map in Redmond. So those green locations are places where we are operating. And those yellow spaces are places where we've had conversations and have some expectation for expansion. Currently have 7 locations, 28 or 29 parking spots, and I think right now somewhere between 50 and 55 people in safe parking right now. 19 of those are minors, most of them elementary age of those 19 minors, and those are mostly at our location at Mountain View Fellowship. We reserve that as a family site. We are here to renew the lease on the 7th and Evergreen property, and that's the property noted here. I thought I'd give you just a sense of what it was like to be in safe parking and to successfully move on from it. And so Heather came, and I asked if Heather would just briefly share her story, her experience of what it was like to be in safe parking and what she and her husband are doing now.
Heather, thank you so much for joining us. But Rick, I first want to commend you because when you were here maybe a year and a half ago, I said, please get families into safe parking. You know, when you say there are 19 minors, and thank you for putting them at your fellowship, at your church. That's so important. Kids shouldn't have to live their lives that way.
Yeah, I just briefly add this morning and every morning when I'm at work, we're a bus stop now. And every morning kids get on the bus, and it's a sight, and they were your neighbors. They were your neighbors. Yeah.
They were, but they're very happy and they enjoy being at the church and stuff like that. The little kids that run around there and stuff. But I went into safe parking about this time last year, and now have a apartment in Primeville. Husband has a job. We just met a lot of great people, and with safe parking, having a case manager and having someone to go to for the resources and to help you with a hand up instead of a hand out to move forward was the best thing for us. And so we're very grateful and thankful for safe parking. And I still help out as much as I can with volunteering at the church or anything I can do with safe parking.
Yeah, and your volunteer role at the church, will you tell them what you do?
I help with the shower and laundry for the homeless. It's mainly for the safe parking people to come in and be able to do showers and laundry and stuff. So I was just there. It's to help guide the families and be able to help kind of take care of the kids so the parents can actually shower and work on laundry and stuff like that. So, and I've been doing that the same amount of time that I was in safe parking, but I'm still doing it even though I'm not in safe parking.
Yeah, she's driving from Prineville back to Redmond to help volunteer to help provide access to laundry and shower. And so Heather and Jeff are incredible and have worked really hard and are out there doing the self-sufficient thing and killing it. And we're really, really thankful for them.
Yes. And we're very thankful for safe parking to help us get to where we are today.
Thank you for your story.
Just to I recognize you probably know all these details, but just a quick summary of what we do at a safe parking site. These are parking lots they could be churches, they could be publicly owned lots like the county lot or a city owned lot. They could be a business, a service organization like the VFW. We provide at our expense porta potties, garbage service. We have power at some sites and are working on getting power at a couple of more. We also have generators if that is necessary. And then most folks don't use their black water and gray water tanks like traditional recreational RV folks do. But if they do, we make sure that they have a plan to service that. We provide safety in a number of ways. We have cameras at every site so we can see what's going on and who's there and what hours and all of that. We have staff who are visiting site. I wouldn't say every site every day, but multiple times per week. And with volunteers there's an on-site presence pretty much every day. And then it's to not just provide a place for people to be, but to provide a path out. And so case managers weekly meet with participants and create a plan. And that might be accessing affordable housing lists. It might be accessing it's always going to be around housing, but if there are other needs we're going to address, if they lost a birth certificate or identification, or they need help navigating a legal issue because they got a ticket for not having insurance, we can help guide them through that. Was that an amen?
That was, yes, yeah.
The 7th and Evergreen in particular, at the last meeting, the commission approved up to 6 vehicles, which is the max that the city code allows. We've had 5 there because the terrain just makes it difficult to fit a 6th unless they were smaller vehicles. In the spring of last year, the city passed a time, place, manner ordinance limiting unauthorized camping around safe parking sites. So that was positive for us in that we had some measure of control around safe parking sites. It incentivized a business to come online as a safe parking site. However, one of the unintended consequences of that time, place, manner ordinance is that it shifted a lot of folks who were kind of on the west side or central part of Redmond, and really that ordinance really pushed people east. And that created a pressure, I think, that neighbors recognized of seeing more unauthorized encampments pop up on the east side of town. And that's where this property is as well. Now, we still saw no increased calls to law enforcement. We just went through a pretty significant weather and ice event. Everybody was fine. There was a real concern about that property and how will it be accessible in snow. 12 inches of snow, and everybody was able to access it. It was safe. But that time, place, manner ordinance did create a new pressure on that east side of town. Just a sense of who's there right now. And I'll highlight the 2 names with the yellow text as well. So we just kind of drew out 2 people. We see generally kind of 2 categories of people in safe parking. Older individuals who are into retirement age and often have a disability, and younger families who individuals or couples or with kids. Younger families, so I'm going to just say generally those under 55 tend to be able to move on towards self-sufficiency and employment and are doing well. Heather and Jeff are killing it out there in Prineville, and they're doing great. It's that older set of folks it's really difficult. And so you can see we've got them on housing lists, but if you're 40th or you're 400th or you're 1,000 plus, as John is, you're just waiting for a very long time. And that's the pinch point of why people get into safe parking, but then sort of stay there. We're waiting for that opportunity for them to come up on a housing list. And so I just want to give you a sense of why people get to safe parking, why it might take longer for some folks to move on. My request today is these 3 requests. 1, would you consider renewing the lease for a 24-month period or perhaps even longer? We wanted to get permission to bring in gravel to the parking pad areas to help with fire risk. And then certainly, if you have any other properties in mind, we'd love to talk. We think that we certainly have staff capacity and funding for another 12 sites, 12 parking spaces, I should say. And so we're always on the hunt for more property where safe parking can work. And with that, I'll stop. And if you have questions or comments, I'd love to hear it.
Thank you very much. Great to see you today. I know in the media recently, and this is just information, apartments are opening up, which is good to hear. Just development of apartments, apartment capacity in Central Oregon. So that's just good to hear. Hopefully, there's market rate and rent controlled, so two different areas there.
Mhm.
Also, City of Redmond, we're proceeding with building the House Bill 4079 40-acre development. So there's another opportunity for rent controlled opportunities coming online and capacity in the market. So the next couple of years, I think it's going to be built out a little bit more. So there's good things happening out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. How have, you mentioned the, minimal need to call law enforcement, but how are the interactions with the neighbors in that neighborhood at this point? I mean, we heard quite an earful back in the day when we were considering whether to allocate this property for safe parking, and it would be great to just get a sense of the views of the neighbors and the relationships of the neighbors with the current residents.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. We were getting some communication, text or email from some neighbors early on. I would say in the last easily 6 months, we have not heard any communication. And usually those communications were concerns. They saw an unauthorized encampment. They felt driving too fast down the gravel road, those sorts of things. We haven't heard any of that in the last 6 months.
And neither have I, because I actually gave my cell phone number out. And the last time I heard from Paul in the neighborhood was May 25th.
Yeah.
So I just wanted him to know that because Christy and I went door to door, and I thought it was so important to be transparent to the neighborhood what we were considering doing and to listen to them. And yes, that's the last time I've heard from someone in that neighborhood.
And I think some of that corresponds with as well when the time, place, manner ordinance from the city went into effect, and we began to see a migration of unauthorized encampments and folks moving from the west and central part east. That was noticeable. We noticed it, and you can still notice the effect of it on the east side of town. And I'm very sympathetic to the neighbors and how the east side of town is shouldering more of the issue of homelessness than the west part of town. But neighbor interactions have been fine and really quiet. And I would say that's generally true of all of our safe parking sites. Businesses nearby, neighbors, property owners regularly will comment that these sites are so much more quiet than they first thought they would be. They just are almost not noticeable after a while.
My second question is kind of a broader question, and Heather, you could give us some insights on this, from your own experience and from others as well. But the safe parking program in Redmond, I think it's pretty amazing how fast this program has grown, how many people it's able to serve, and I wonder about, so many people have been are either now in a stable, safe transitional housing setting or have moved through to more long-term housing. I wonder, without this safe parking program, where would those people be? Where do we think that those people would be right now?
Out on 9th and Antler or 17th Street.
Living.
Just living off
Living out at an
tents
RV
or their cars, or yeah.
I also had a question about, the population at 7th and Evergreen right now. It's pretty significant senior population.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, is there, it's clearly challenging for these folks to find, attainable, affordable housing to move on to. What kind of income sources do they have? Are some of these folks on Social Security or have other kinds of, and kind of what's the gap between what the support that they're getting and what they would need to have in hand to be able to move into housing?
Yeah, thank you. On the side, you'll note the names. I put ages and then income source. So you'll see that those older folks are on either Social Security or disability. with the exception of the younger couple where they have one partner who's working full time. And that's consistently, I mean, that's a really great snapshot of what we see at all of our locations. I don't want to generalize that they're just two communities, but that's generally true. There's the under 50 and then there's the over 50, and that over 50 often have a disability and are on, if they haven't reached Social Security age, they're close to it. And they have limited options. John is not ever going to go back to work. He's got some physical limitations that are serious. Dawn has been in and out of the hospital probably a dozen times in the last 3 months. And that's just the reality. So they're living off of $900 to $1,200 per month is their income. And that will probably always be their income. And I think one of the challenges we face with Housing Works is fantastic and they do great work. Even they would tell you that they're really designed to serve people in the 30 to 60 or maybe even 30 to 80% AMI, whereas our population is consistently 0 to 30% AMI. And so, if you're living off of $15,000 a year, it's going to be a struggle no matter what. And that's the missing rung on the ladder. That's where the bottleneck is right now. Does that answer your question? Now I have ideas for how we could fill that gap, but we'll save that for another time.
I guess my one other question is, so as we look towards expanding capacity and the county potentially being able to provide additional space for safe parking sites in this 7th and Evergreen area, is there there's on your map, there's the two gray shaded parcels that are also county property. Are those just unsuitable for expansion? And I mean, also, 5 or 6 it is a very kind of human scale, manageable number of safe parking sites in one area. I mean, would you even, if the land was suitable, would it be better to add more sites in this area, or would it be better to keep adding other locations?
I think this land is limiting because of the terrain itself is just really limiting. I think generally the city code says in both Bend and Redmond, you can go up to 6 vehicles per site. I think that's a decent number. I would feel comfortable with 8. I think beyond that, you really do begin to need to have on-site presence all the time, like a person on the site all the time when you get into 10, 12, 15 vehicles. And then the costs go up considerably. But at 5, 6, 7, 8, I think these sites operate quietly. It's possible, but I think these particular lots are really limited in what we could do there.
Okay.
Isn't there like a big, huge dip?
It was
It would take
a
a lot of
pond
fill.
at one point,
Okay,
apparently.
we could have a pond.
Yes, we could put a fishing pond in and we could do,
Down
solve a lot of problems here.
the one right at the Evergreen, that's right on Evergreen. I mean, is there any purpose or value for that little chunk of land?
So that property is actually pending sale through our last auction. So we're trying to sort through some easement and challenges there. So it's not available.
Very good.
But if the owner is here in the room and would like to talk to me, we can. I did want to. Some people leave unsuccessfully, and I just wanted to point that out. That we have, I think, 96 individuals served last year. 30 who moved on to a positive destination. 18 of those were permanent housing. When I say positive destination, maybe it didn't fit the definition of permanent housing. Like it could have been transitional, or it could have been a family property, or it could have been rehabilitation. But we had 14 people who exited unsuccessfully. And I guess I just want to draw your attention there. If someone is not compliant with the real basic rules we have, we step in, and there's roughly kind of a 3 strikes you're out kind of thing. But we have had to move some people on because they just don't do well with the basic rules we have. And the 2 most common rules we have that are broken are visitors, unauthorized visitors, or missed case management appointments. And when we see that those become signals to us that something's going on and we need to check in with them. And some people can turn it around, some people don't. We've also exited at least 2 family groups who we exited and we said, okay, you can reapply in 90 days. And they did, and they came back and they were more successful the second time around. So we don't allow just anything to happen at these sites. We control them, and they get pretty quiet pretty fast, but every once in a while we encounter someone who has a hard time playing by the rules.
That's only a 15% failure rate, Rick. So that's really, that's amazing. And the fact that you said that when people go, you had some people that went on to substance use abuse treatment.
Correct.
But that's not really showing here, but you actually, didn't you have like 4?
We call that a positive destination. I cannot call that permanent housing though.
No, I know, but I mean, it's positive because they went to get help for the real root of why they're having the issues. So I just wanted to mention that. So do we?
Well, so I know the ask is for a 2-year extension. My first thought is let's do this annually instead. And I don't know if I'll have support for that, but just this is dynamic. Everything's dynamic. It's moving, it's changing. We've got development opportunities happening around Central Oregon. Apartments are coming online to other big developments in the next few years. So, as I say, I would support a 1-year extension and keeping the conversation going.
How about 18 months? It is
For negotiating, I don't know.
it's a significant amount of work to prepare for an annual presentation, to have the uncertainty around a piece of property, and to constantly be kind of working on developing the next site because this one might be withdrawn from the program in the future.
See, I would do the 2 years because your program is the most successful program in Deschutes County. I think you are a model for what your team does. And the fact that you said you have staff available to expand, I think in today's world, that's really outstanding. The people that work in your program, have a calling, and I appreciate them being there. So anyway.
I'd be happy to support 2 years.
Okay.
I think a compromise at 36 months sounds reasonable to me.
36?
We're negotiating now.
No, we said 2. You asked for 24. Okay. So do you want to make a motion then?
So I will.
Commissioner Chang, I believe the staff report stated that staff would be bringing a consent agenda item forward with the new lease amendment.
24 months.
Exactly. So
Consider a request. Okay, so we don't need to vote or anything? Okay.
Let's receive the direction.
One
Okay.
other piece of this request that we could spend a moment talking about is identifying additional property on this map. There is one of the other properties in orange is a county-owned facility, the fairgrounds. We know that the Fair and Expo is highly motivated to move people out of the 137 acres, actually not too far from 7th and Evergreen, so that those lands can be exchanged and the Fair and Expo expansion can proceed more quickly. I would really like to see the Fair and Expo contributing to pathways to move people out of homelessness so that we can get those 137 acres cleared out and complete the transaction, complete the land exchange. So, I don't think we are in a position to make a decision today on that, but I'd like to add a little bit more encouragement, emphasis to move the exploration of that opportunity along.
Well, they have had the request, and they do have several board members that are supportive of the program, and they just haven't stepped forward at this time. And I can understand why, but on a more a current note, you asked for gravel. Do we have to discuss that? Because I think that sounds like a really good idea.
if you want to give staff direction.
Yes, I think I think you should be allowed to bring in the gravel for parking just to help with fire.
I would support that as well. Just returning to the fairgrounds, they have been talking about this for over a year and a half. So if there are Fair and Expo board members who are supportive, I would like to encourage them to move something. Talk is great. Action is better.
That's okay. Are we good then? I know we're not great, but we're good. So, anyway, thank you, Rick, for running this program.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And you want 12 more spaces. Okay. Maybe someone in the community is hearing what a successful program you're running, and maybe they will answer the call. Okay, we're now to item number 9. Caroline, good morning.
And good morning and happy Valentine's Day. For the record, my name is Caroline House and I'm a senior planner with the Deschutes County Planning Division. And I'm here today because the county has received an appeal of a hearings officer's decision for a declaratory ruling request associated with an Oregon Department of Transportation multi-use path project. And I'm at today's meeting to ask the board to make a decision on whether they would like to hear the appeal. And if the board decides not to hear the appeal, the hearings officer's decision will become the final decision of the county, and then parties can appeal the final decision onto the Land Use Board of Appeals or the Court of Appeals, etc. So a little background on the applicant's request. So ODOT is the applicant, and they've applied for, again, a declaratory ruling requesting interpretations of the county's zoning code, zoning maps, and comprehensive plan to determine if this multi-use path that they're going to be building or want to build will be a use that is permitted outright. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the map of the project. So they're identifying the trail as the Lava Butte Trail, and it starts at the Knott Road, Baker Road, Highway 97 interchange, continues south on the east side of Highway 97, goes on to the High Desert Museum's property where there'll be a connection before continuing under the Highway 97, and then south on to federal lands that are part of the Deschutes National Forest and terminating at the Lava Lands Visitor Center. So I have up there on the map an area identified as subject properties, and that's because only the properties outside of the federal lands are in the county's jurisdiction. So the hearings officer's decision is only specific to that part of the trail. And so that's, I guess, the Highway 97 right-of-way and the High Desert Museum property is really what this review is specific to. And the proposed multi-use path will be open to both bicycle and pedestrian users. So the hearings officer's decision had 3 conclusions. The hearings officer found that the subject Highway 97 right-of-way is zoned rural residential. The hearings officer also found that the applicant's proposal as defined under Deschutes County Code is a road and street project and could be classified as a Class 3 project. And based on that classification or definition of the use, it's a use that's permitted outright on the subject properties, which again are zoned RR10 for the Highway 97 right-of-way. And then there was no dispute for this, but the High Desert Museum's property is zoned open space and conservation. So following the hearings officer's decision, the Wind Links Ranch Trust has filed an appeal. They've identified 7 different appeal issues that they would like the board to consider. And staff believes that these appeal issues kind of relate to 3 key questions that would be before the board if they elect to hear the appeal. So the first is, what effect does a 1999 board decision and findings identifying the zoning as forest use have on this request? And so for a little background, in 1999, ODOT had a proposal for a way station within part of the right-of-way that's subject to this particular review. And as part of that decision, the Board of County Commissioners found that the zoning was actually forest use. So there's a question of what effect does that decision have on this particular request? Additionally, the board would be determining how the county's zone boundaries code should be applied. And lastly, what's the correct definition or use category for this path? And as part of the appellant's appeal request, they're asking for the de novo review by the board if the board wishes to hear this appeal. So I have 2 slides, one's for reasons to hear the appeal, then one for reasons to not hear the appeal. So first, for reasons to hear the appeal is that these issues are largely associated with local code requirements, and the board could potentially be given deference if an appeal is filed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Additionally, the board may wish to concur, reverse, or modify the hearings officer's decision. And lastly, to the extent there was any type of procedural error in the previous review, a second hearing in front of the board would remedy that issue. Moving on to reasons to not hear the appeal. So in staff's opinion, the hearings officer's decision was well written and reasoned. The hearings officer's decision has extensive analysis in how he reached his conclusions, citations to case law, and his interpretations. So again, in staff's opinion, it's a well-reasoned and written decision. Additionally, both parties, and parties here being ODOT and the Wind Links Ranch Trust, were represented by attorneys before the hearings officer. And lastly, regardless of who the final decision maker is at the local level, this decision, in staff's opinion, will likely be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals. So based on all those factors, staff's recommendation is for the board to not hear this appeal, but I am available for questions and we can go over anything else that you may have that you'd like to discuss.
Before the discussion starts, I'd just like to indicate I'm going to recuse myself on this item. This is a quasi-judicial matter, land use matter, unlike the transportation system plan, which is a legislative matter, which I will be participating on in later, which does address this among many other multi-use paths. As a policy board member for the MPO, I was listed, on the letterhead, the MPO letterhead, for a letter that encouraged inclusion of this project in the transportation system plan with this specific alignment. So essentially, I am signed on to something that that supports the alignment that's in question with this quasi-judicial matter, and and after discussion with legal counsel, I don't believe I have to recuse myself from this, but I think that that indicates a potential bias in this matter, and so I think it's more appropriate for me to recuse myself. I'll just go sit over there.
Okay. Okay, Commissioner DeBonne.
So, reading through the hearings officer decision, a little bit of history here. The 1999 decision for the way station, it wasn't substantive to the decision, and kind of documents pretty well the fact that, well, it was mentioned as F2 and nobody appealed it or thought of it as a contested issue, so it just went on. So and then getting back down to the Mylars and the maps and the layers of this thing. My conclusion is the hearings officer decision is well reasoned, and for the points stated is that I'll accept this hearings officer decision and not thinking that we need to hear it in front of us. I don't see any kind of topics that I'm yearning to go dive into.
Okay.
So I support that.
You support the hearings officer?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was just a couple items. If there's anything else, maybe we can.
No, I honestly found it fascinating that the map in here has that property as for FU2, forest use 2, and yet we're saying that it really isn't forest use next to the highway.
Which map are you referencing, I guess?
I'm representing where the parties that are the appellate in the situation. So I'm looking at the map. I Googled it on my phone to make sure I was looking at the location of the scale house loop where it was, and that all looks like it's really green. So I don't quite understand why the 99 decision didn't carry over to this point in time?
So the hearings officer outlined his analysis, but essentially, at the time, or my understanding is at the time that the board had the information before them, and I think this is the hearings officer's analysis, is they didn't have the same information that we have available today. So we have, DIAL, our interactive map GIS system. So my understanding of the hearings officer's decision, I don't mean to misrepresent all of the analysis because there's a lot there, is that essentially with the information before him today, he found that the zoning is RR10 and that perhaps in that 1999 decision, we don't have to rely on that because we have other information in the record today that he used in his analysis to reach again that the conclusion is zoned RR10. And he found, or he cited case law for what he believed was the legal effect of that decision, and that he found that the county is not bound by that interpretation. And I'd probably ask legal counsel to provide more information on that
Yes,
analysis.
I see Stephanie.
Who's ready?
Morning, Commissioners. Stephanie Marshall, Assistant Legal Counsel. I've been listening to the presentations and thank you. So if you don't mind repeating what the question was specifically, is it what effect should the county consider with respect to the 1999 decision?
Right.
Yes.
It was a conditional use decision, but it was
Right.
still a decision.
Right.
And I look at this map and it's green.
Mhm.
And I'm going like, okay, they're saying it's forest land and yet we're saying it's really RR10.
Right.
And I'm going, okay, so why is this green?
Well,
I mean, where did this come from? It says, it's got a siding on it on the map.
well, I guess I would say ultimately, if there are questions that the board believes warrant further review, that would be a consideration for you to make as to a vote whether to accept the appeal for review. And I can't answer these questions for you. I was not the hearings officer. And, I believe that I agree with staff's assessment that the hearings officer's decision was well-reasoned and supported. That said, it ultimately is up to the board. There may be additional questions you have for the parties, requesting additional analysis, wanting to get into it further. I'm not here to make the case for or against the 1999 decision. That's not my role today.
Okay. According to the memo, the board's review, if it was going to be done, should be de novo because relevant material in the county records related to the application was not included by staff. That's what the notice of appeal says on it. Clearly was not included by staff and only came to light through a public records request. So I feel badly if we cannot hear it, but undoubtedly it sounds like it's going to be going to LUBA. But I didn't go to law school. I only took a little bit of law. And I honestly, if I had a decision like that on my property from 1999, I would wonder what was going on in today's world. Is that being ignored?
Correct. Right.
I mean, that's what it appears to me.
Well, and like I said, I'm not here to take a position one way or the other. I'm just here to state that, your decision today is whether to accept the appeal and to move forward to review it, in which you can delve into these questions a little bit further, or to accept the hearings officer's reasoning and the support that he had for his decision making. And it sounds like if there are questions, that accepting the appeal. I also wanted to circle back to the procedural question, the public records request. We were unable to identify one that had been made. So those are issues that we can't really speak to directly.
So when researching the 1999 decision, it was the weigh station, the truck weigh station. And so then I went back to DIAL itself and I looked at the map and that whole way station is in the right of way of the state highway system. So that was interesting to see because I was kind of expecting it to be, like a little carve out on the parcel next to it, which is Forest Service south of this border, but it would have been either private property or something north of that, or there's a lot wider right of way north of that also. So that put me in the spot of, this is a state highway with an existing right of way. And I know we're getting down to the intricacies of if it goes to the center line and the zoning from the neighboring parcel or not. But I conclude that, yeah, if there's a project proposed in the right of way, and, I do support that it's a class 3 project, associated with a roadway. Yeah, I just don't see any domain for discussion that I disagree with, I guess is the conclusion.
Okay. So therefore, do you want to make
So, yeah, as I say,
any further discussion, or do you want to make a motion?
as I say, I have come to a conclusion. So my motion would be to move approval of order 2024-008, an order denying review of the hearings officer decision on file number 24723-302-DR.
Okay. Yes, I will be. So I'm not happily.
Right, yeah. Unless you both, unless there's a majority vote to accept the appeal.
Well, I don't want to hold it up anymore.
Right.
That's what government does. They continually hold things up. And doesn't make me happy. So I will second your motion unhappily. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank
There we
you,
go.
commissioners.
Thank you.
So we're now at item number 10. Thank you, Caroline, and happy Valentine's. Nathaniel, yes. Have you been with the county now 5.5 years? Is that what it is?
6.
6, okay. Well, thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. For the record, my name is Nathaniel Miller and I'm associate planner with the Planning Division. The item before you this morning is a consideration to hear of an appeal to a hearings officer decision for a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. The commercial activity is a proposed winery at 20520 Bowery Lane. This property is just north of the city of Bend. A little about the application and proposal. The applicants, Dwayne and Dina Barker, requested a conditional use permit to establish a winery with associated uses in the multiple use agricultural zone. The request also includes a site plan review for the winery and the associated uses. The proposal includes the conversion of an existing barn for small scale wine production and wine storage. There's currently a vineyard on the property and no new buildings or structures are included in this request. The approval would include the production of up to 2,000 cases of wine annually, as well as hosting wine-related events, wine tasting, wine dinners, and other wine marketing events. So about the appeal, the appellant, Toby Bayard, submitted a timely appeal to the hearings officer decision on January 9th of 2024, which approved this conditional use permit and site plan review. The appellant requests the board initiate a review and conduct a public hearing to evaluate the 4 following issues. 1, whether wineries can only be sited on property in the exclusive farm use zone pursuant to ORS 215-452 and not in any other zone. 2, whether the hearings officer erred in finding that a winery can be approved on MUA 10 zone property as a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use. 3, whether there is inconsistency from the hearings officer between the subject applications and a previous approval of a commercial activity in conjunction with farm use for a winery in the EFU zone. And 4, whether the hearings officer erred in the incorporation of testimony placed into the public record. As for staff recommendations, staff recommends this proposal and appeal be heard before the board in a public hearing. As noted in the staff memo, there were numerous conditions of approval listed in the hearings officer decision. Staff have concerns about the application meeting all the applicable standards for the site plan review. In addition, and as with any application, staff have concerns in confirming compliance with numerous conditions of approval outside a formal land use process. If the board decides to hear the appeal.
Could you repeat that again? Back over to that one.
Oh, sure. So one of the things that we do during any type of a review is we try to look at the criteria, look at the proposal, and then make sure that the application meets the applicable criteria. What's happened in this particular instance is that the hearings officer approval listed a lot of conditions of approval, and we like to see those conditions met inside a formal land use process. So what it does essentially, Commissioner DeBone, is it defers discretion outside of a formal land use process when we have an approval with lots of conditions of approval, and then we as staff are going back and forth with an applicant about whether or not they meet the applicable criteria outside the actual review period.
Well, so a formal land use process, this is how did it get to a hearings officer then? I hadn't thought down this path.
Sure. So a little bit of background on the file and the application is that the applicant had made the applications, and I'm going to apologize. I inherited this file right before I was assigned to a hearing.
This is a different aspect of it.
So I'm catching up on my knowledge. It's not fully comprehensive when the review was in its early stages. But the applicant intentionally prolonged their applications during the incompleteness period check and using up 215 days of the extension period that was allocated to them for their review. And then it was referred to a public hearing on August 4th. We did a staff report for the hearing, and our recommendations and information went to the hearings officer. They made their decision in a public hearing on October 24th. But those conditions of approval were items that were outlined in the staff report that went before the hearings officer when he was making his.
So the property owner put an application in, incomplete, extended the record, maybe did some homework to make it more palatable or whatever the concept is here. But yeah, I'm still missing the, when you say outside of a land use process, I guess I didn't understand when you said that comment.
So
it looks like
are you saying that there are all these conditions of approval that address your concerns that are raised, but the process of confirming whether those conditions of approval have been met is outside of the review process? Is that?
And Commissioner, I can speak to that. Your planning manager, Will Groves, Chair Commissioners. Good morning. So land use decisions come with conditions of approval, and those conditions of approval are supposed to be clear and objective, easily implemented, and something that people aren't going to, disagree about how to implement those. And overwhelmingly, those conditions that we write and that hearings officers write fall in that standard. You shall have, 5 pounds of this, it shall be 1 acre. You shall paint it this color blue. And in this decision, there are a number of conditions of approval that we believe will have knock-on effects, in that we think that the applicant and the neighbors and county staff may disagree about how to interpret those conditions. And so this is unusual. Hearings officers usually are pretty good about narrowing these things down. In this case, we've got some concerns about having to interpret these in a subsequent step. And under the statutory scheme, you're precluded as a local government from engaging in discretionary decisions outside a land use process. So, for example, if there was a condition of approval that said the planted landscaping shall be pretty, at that point, someone's going to have to make a decision about what that means. That's a discretionary decision that involves kind of personal values, and people would reasonably disagree, and you're not supposed to do that outside of a public process. So in an unusual circumstance here, staff has some concerns with the hearings officers, the implementability of the hearings officer's decision because of some of these conditions that are less clear than they might be.
I mean, so that sounds like a recommendation to hear it, so we could make it a better product here at this level.
That's staff's recommendation. Of course, as Nathaniel will speak to, there's a variety of considerations whether to engage or not. These difficulties are something that could be addressed in other ways at later steps. So this isn't staff saying that you must hear it, but we're one of many perspectives as you come into this, and for our purposes, we're worried about implementing the decision as written later.
Thank you.
So if we heard this and ultimately there was an approval with conditions, that conditions list would likely be shorter than what we're seeing before us right
You would
now,
see it
or
refined. So for those conditions that we have concerns with, you would see staff recommending, the hearings officer proposed you solve this problem in a particular way. Here's a couple extra sentences to explain what that means. So, again, in the metaphor, if we said the vegetation must be pretty, we would say, the vegetation must be kept alive and attractive, watered at all times. And if it dies, be replaced. So there just needs, I think in each case, there needs to be a couple more sentences about what it means for something to be interpretable.
pretty and attractive are still in the eye of the
Yeah.
holder. But
We deal usually alive is the threshold we go for.
Well, when I look through the conditions, a lot of them are kind of just pulling them off the shelf, saying you shall comply to, licensing from, in some specific areas. So yeah, I guess I didn't look at it for which ones are hard to implement.
Yeah, and as you look at some of those conditions, you'll notice that a lot of them refer to the site plan review criteria and just kind of the details that we would want to see on a site plan for ensuring that we had safe driveway access, right? Clear vision areas were clearly marked on a site plan. Some of the basic things that we would typically want to see up front.
Okay, so that could be a disconnect, isn't it? Could have or should have been part of the application to kind of rule yes or no on, instead of in the conditions after the fact, where you need to go back with the clipboard and say, well, do you really meet this condition or not? Okay. It's just got it more interesting,
It seems like there's 31 of them. It seems like a lot. This is an unusual decision?
Well, as Will was mentioning, in our staff reports, we include conditions of approval. Now, this one was referred to a public hearing because we had questions about whether or not this could be approved. We said, dear hearings officer, here's what we're seeing. If in the event that you do want to issue approval, we recommend these conditions of approval. And what happened in this instance is that many of those conditions of approval that we listed in the staff report ended up in his decision.
If I might try another metaphor, say there was a rule that when you're driving your car, you have your seatbelt on. And usually at the application stage, people would be like, here's a picture of me with my seatbelt on. We're ready to go. And in this application, there were a number of circumstances where that wasn't available metaphorically, things like that. And so the condition of approval says, well, before you start driving, please have your seatbelt on. So when you see a lot of conditions of approval, frequently it means that the application wasn't complete or able to demonstrate full completeness with the criteria. And the hearings officer said, well, you didn't show this, but it seems feasible that you could get there. Please just do this in the future.
yeah, and I mean, I know we don't want to mix land use applications, but my recollection was that the meadery up by Sisters, that the list of conditions was less than a page, maybe like 7. And then this is 4 pages long. It's quite a lot. Okay, were you done with your presentation, or should we wait for more? I'm happy to wait to ask more questions till you've completed your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Chang. Yeah, so I will just conclude by saying if the board decides to hear the appeal, staff recommends a de novo review of this application, just to consider the entire record and any new evidence or testimony that you might see appropriate. There are 3 orders in the packet. One is to hear the appeal and proposal de novo, one to hear limited de novo, and one to decline to hear. So, staff are prepared to answer any further questions you may have at this time.
So substantively, what does agricultural water look like on this property? And I don't know if it was in the memo or not. I kind of thought about this recently. So, this is a crop to be watered commercially. Is there water rights associated with this property? Do you know that offhand?
I don't know that offhand. That's not.
I mean, there must be. So I'm just going to,
Right, and that's one I would probably point you towards the applicant to get a response to.
Okay. Is that addressed in the record at all?
It's not addressed in the record.
Well, I mean, the facts are out there somewhere. I just didn't see it in here, and it was one of my questions.
So that would be another thing if we if we heard this de novo, that could be added to the record to address Commissioner DeBone's question.
That is correct.
So I had a couple of questions. The whole treatment of transportation in this application, and I'm sorry, maybe some of this was in the record, but you know, I only had a chance to read the staff memo before today's meeting. But on transportation, there was sort of this argument made that when the new Hunnell Road is developed, it will create different access point opportunities for this property, and that would alleviate some of the transportation stresses on the rest of the neighborhood. But the last I heard, the alignment of Hunnell Road at this very bottom, this very southern portion coming into the city of Bend was in question. You know, there was a lot of uncertainty about where it was going to swing out and hit Cooley. And I would love to know what, you know, whether we know what the alignment of Hunnell Road, at least at this point, is going to be. And if so, whether it supports that argument that this is, you know, a fairly easy access off of Hunnell Road, as opposed to, you know, if Hunnell Road is stuck way out to the west, you know, then the connections to Hunnell Road, I think, are more in question, and I would want to know more about that to understand the traffic impacts for the neighborhood. Is any of that in the record?
It's not. We do have comments from the road department, and they did make mention that the Hunnell Road project was scheduled to be completed by, I think it was March, in March of this year, in the end of this month. But I would probably pull in the Deschutes County Road Department to make any comments related to access and any changes that might have happened in the project.
That was one question I had. One of my other questions was about you know, the relationship between the grapes and the winemaking. So there are grapes being grown on the property, and there's no questions about whether that is an authorized use of the land to grow grapes. What we're really talking about is this associated use. But I did want to, I would like to get a sense of, you know, how much wine and how much grapes. You know, if the amount of grapes that are being grown is just a really very small portion of the agricultural product that's being value added, processed into wine, then I'm not sure if you can say that this is an associated use of the grape growing, which is, you know, the whole foundation for allowing or authorizing a winery. So, is there anything in the record about that kind of the volume of wine production, the amount of grapes that are needed, the amount of grapes that are actually being grown on site, or in Deschutes County? Sorry, that was the nuance to that. Is you know, agricultural product from within Deschutes County.
Yeah, there are no hard numbers in the record. My understanding is that they are using grapes from the property to be used in the winemaking, but they're also bringing in wines from other vineyards in Deschutes County to be a part of that process as well. That's part of the proposal.
Of the 2,000 cases annually.
That's how I understand it.
That's what you'd said earlier. So
When you can bring, state law allows bringing in grapes from adjoining counties, right? I mean, there's like a perimeter opportunity there so this has probably all been worked out in the valley more than here, but that's an opportunity also.
Just a couple of other questions about the just about this process. Are we deliberating? Would a hearing focus on issues that the state will give us deference on? Or are these matters of state statute that, you know, if this goes on to LUBA anyway, we wouldn't get any deference and it doesn't matter what we think, or not doesn't matter, but, you know, we wouldn't get any deference.
The MUA 10 zone is not regulated specifically by statute in this particular arena. So you would or could be given deference in this particular situation. I think something else that might help you in your consideration is the applicant has waived the 150-day clock on this application. So there's no time constraints as well. And I do want to make mention of that.
And then the one other thing that I'm pretty sure I could have gotten a sense of from the record, but again, I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. How much public comment was there in favor or against or opposed to this application?
Yeah, great question.
There were 32 emails from Toby. Submitted 32 emails, which are in the record, according to page 3 of our page 82 of our packet.
How many other people were involved in this process?
Great. So in general, during the review, staff notes that, we received 32 comments altogether. One in just kind of expressed concern and then one in support. But the majority of these were comments in opposition. At the public hearing, there were approximately 15 people who testified. 9 were in support, 6 in opposition.
So wait, 50 people?
I'm sorry, 15
sorry.
15 people testified at the public hearing. 9 in support, 6 in opposition.
Thank you.
So it's close.
So I'm supportive of hearing this one.
Hearing this case would allow us to dig into transportation questions, what Commissioner DeBone's water question. So there's, and if the state is likely to give us deference on our interpretations on MUA 10, then those would be reasons to hear it, and I would support that.
So
With an open record also de novo.
yes. All right. Do they have a limit on the event? Are they doing any events here?
They do have events listed as one of the activities for the winery.
That's what I thought. But it didn't restrict no weddings like the meadery out of Sisters.
Specifically said no weddings.
Yeah. So
Does it say no weddings again?
yeah. So the
On
applicant has-
Valentine's Day. I love it. Yeah, like really? It's just, what is wrong with weddings? So anyway, yeah, I guess you don't want to have them at a winery. So is there a motion then?
So I'll move approval of order number 2024-006, an order accepting review of hearings officer decision, approving a conditional use permit for commercial activities in conjunction with farm use at 20520 Bowery Lane, Bend, and establishing the review will be heard de novo.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Okay.
Thank you for taking it over. And thank you for being here for 6 years.
Thank you, commissioners. I'll work with admin staff and get this scheduled.
Okay, great. We are now on item number 11.
Morning, Commissioners. Holly Harris, Behavioral Health Director. And I'm here today to request approval of Chair Signature Document 2024-135, the Oregon Health Authority agreement. So this is our county financial assistance agreement that we have long been awaiting over a year's worth of negotiations. We now have an agreement that I feel comfortable bringing before you to request approval to sign. Couple of things to note, you will see some increases in our contract, which is great. Cost of living adjustments were, for the first time in my time with the county, at least, included from the state. They were passed through to counties. That was part of our something we discovered through our negotiations that hadn't been happening necessarily. That was an option for us. So we were able to get those passed on, which was really great. It's not really clear which service elements got the cost of living adjustments. We're still working with OHA to get clarity on how this all really played out with each service element. There's a lot of them, as you know, but we did see some increases as outlined in the staff report. We also were able to obtain some language, like wasn't new language. It was actually, we're able to keep some language regarding our ability to provide services as long as it's subject to availability of the funds. So sort of trying to address some of those unfunded mandates that can be really problematic in this work. And then we were also able to get this on an 18-month contract for this year, which is wonderful because now it will align with the county fiscal year contracts, which will make our budgeting lives much simpler. Yes. So some wins. Not perfect. There are some errors already that we've identified within the funding amount. So there will be amendments forthcoming. We've already identified some of those, but they're still working through what other ones might be available. So
Are the errors to our advantage or disadvantage?
we're yet to some to our advantage, some to our disadvantage.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of the high level outline of what's I have before you.
Well, when you say negotiating for the last year, this is kind of one of those examples of administrative overhead of basically a wrestling match with the agency we're trying to provide services on the ground with. So it jumps right out to me when you say those words, you know.
It was a lot of work, and I wish it had ended up with more robust changes, but it is a lot to negotiate. These are large contracts, as you know, with lots of different programmatic elements. So for the next 18 months, we will be continuing to meet with Oregon Health Authority and working through each service element. There's a commitment from all of us to continue this work over the next 18 months. So I hope to see some continued changes. We have a lot more work to do in this contract, as I'm sure Kim and Dave can attest to.
A message to our state legislature, make it clear, make it simple. Let's get the services on the ground instead of having to negotiate in the middle of this. That's the problem. You know, legislature says something, Oregon Health Authority has their staff, we're on the ground, and it takes a year of negotiating, a lot of effort.
And it's really disappointing when you hear that the state is running such as the program where if you have a child who's been harmed in some way, and that phone system that the state took over in, I believe, 2018, 2019 is still working as inefficiently as it was in 2019. I just heard the situation where somebody was on hold for 45 minutes with a child that needed some help, 45 minutes. And that's the way it was in 19. So, you know, Holly, you were very patient. Yeah, at least it's going to be 18 months before you'll have to start negotiating what? A year early?
We're already negotiating.
Yes,
For the
I
next
know.
one.
I would think so.
Going process.
Yes.
I'm really glad to see that there was a substantial increase in that, and excited to hear that our cost of living adjustments are being recognized and factored in. These are really important funds for the Behavioral Health Division to do its important work in the community. So glad to see that we got here. And with that, I can move approval of Chair's signature of document number 2024-135, an agreement accepting grant funding from the Oregon Health Authority.
And I will second it.
Is there any further discussion? And I did want to also mention the CCBHC analysis from the state of Oregon. I thought it would probably be a federal deficiency, but I was told in our behavioral health meeting a month and a half ago, I believe, that no, it's the state of Oregon that still has not done the analysis of we've spent millions of dollars, and what is actually being accomplished with that spending. So
Well, on that note, we did receive a preliminary report. It's not available for sharing yet, but they finally completed after 5 years an analysis of CCBHC at a state level, and it should be out soon for public consumption. And from preliminary reports, it looks like we're faring quite well and doing really good work with those dollars, which we suspected, but it's nice
Right.
to kind of see the analysis done, and it took entirely too long.
5 years. Yes. It's unbelievable. So thank you, Holly. I'm glad to hear that we will be seeing that sooner rather than maybe later. So Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you for joining us, and happy Valentine's Day.
You as well.
Take a quick break.
Sure. We're going to take a very quick 5-minute break. Thank you so much. Transportation System Plan Update. Thank you so much.
Deliberations.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. For the record, I'm Tarek Rawlings, Senior Transportation Planner with the Community Development Department and the Road Department. Today, we have continued deliberations scheduled for you. This is the second meeting related to deliberations for the draft 2020 to 2040 Transportation System Plan for the county. This follows last week's initiation of deliberations on the 7th. We had a full schedule, and so we're continuing deliberations today on the 14th. I just wanted to give a couple maybe just a broad disclaimer. There was mention of different issue areas over the course of the entirety of this review. There's a matrix before you that really just characterizes some of the high level issue areas we've seen. There were 2 requests for sort of a somewhat of a quantification of opposition support for 2 different topics, one being the South Bend UGB footbridge topic, and then the other being the Sisters to Black Butte Ranch multi-use pathway community connection. There was, I gave sort of a tallied list of the number of record submittals associated with each of the kind of with the comments received. I just wanted to note, and as you've seen through those comments, they often have other attachments, things like that. There's in the case, so as an example, in the case of the Sisters to Black Butte Ranch, there's an attachment where there's a petition with 146 names on it. So there's things like that we don't extrapolate signatures from, like a voting process with a petition. That's something the county clerk does through a formal process. So we take record submittals as those, as you've seen them basically presented in that when you reviewed record. They sometimes have different materials or studies or other attachments. And so I just wanted to put a disclaimer there that and I've tried to kind of echo this throughout the course of the review of this proposal here, that a tally is not really an accurate count of any type of detailed quantification of support or any other characterization of really black and white, yes or no support. These are often people with multiple comments. They have multiple attachments or other things that indicate there's potentially they're speaking on behalf of groups or agencies or other committees and things like that. So that's all to say. I know that you know that because you reviewed the record, and there's a lot of different nuance in there in those comments and submittals. I just wanted to put that out before we dove into deliberations. So if there's no preliminary questions, or I'm happy to really entertain any initial questions that we have. But other than that, I'd be happy to go through the deliberation matrix. This is not, you're not limited to the topics that are on this matrix here. Feel free to mention and deliberate on anything that is pertinent to this proposal. But if there's, and feel free to go at what order. If you're interested in these topic numbers, you can start at whatever order. These are in no order of priority or anything else. So I'm happy to proceed however the board prefers at this time.
Oh, you are being so flexible.
There you go.
Yes. Just like my favorite husband today. Yes. So lovely.
So one comment though, I mean, let's acknowledge that. I mean, this is a very mature work product, and you know, high 90% of this thing, it looks like it's stable, ready to go and dial in. So you know, we're talking about peripheral issues here, obviously a lot of engagement, a lot of strong opinions, but a very small part of the big picture. So I just want to acknowledge that up front. And you know, we'll bring it around at the end too.
Oh, since you said you're flexible, so could we start with item number 2 then?
Certainly, whichever you'd like to start
Just for something different?
Certainly. Absolutely. So if without further ado, the issue area of number 2 is framed as a question: should the board include a conceptual community connection multi-use pathway in the updated TSP between the City of Sisters and the Black Butte Ranch Resort community? You've heard this topic mentioned a lot throughout the course of this this review. The Planning Commission, during their process, did deliberate on this issue. They ultimately recommended to amend the draft TSP to remove that connection from Sisters to Black Butte Ranch. We just note that this is still at the discretion of the board for whatever final decision point here, but really, if the board should decide to include this or retain this multi-use pathway community connection, they would just have to essentially deliberate to an answer of yes to this question, that yes, we would like to include that connection still within the TSP. That's one option. The result of that would be that we would retain the existing language. The other option is that the board may remove that language, remove that conceptual connection between Sisters and Black Butte Ranch. Those are really the two options for this issue area here.
One thing that I haven't asked on this specific topic that I am curious about is, was the Sisters to Black Butte Ranch connection in the last TSP?
That's a really good question. I don't believe offhand, just because I believe the results, these proposed community connections were through a current review of BPAC and coordination with BPAC.
There
But
weren't multi-use pathways in the last TSP. Were there?
I don't believe so, and nor are there really a lot in this TSP other than support from kind of a policy consideration for those community connectors, as Tarek mentioned, again, brought forward through the BPAC group.
I mean, just to take it from the top on this topic, it's really important to remind everyone that any multi-use pathways that have been to this point proposed in the TSP, in the draft TSP, county is not designing them, county is not building them, the county is not funding them, the county is not maintaining them. So it really, really doesn't matter that much whether these projects are mentioned in the TSP or not. One advantage of one benefit of putting these projects in the TSP is just aspirational. These are things that are, many people in our community want to see, without getting into the nitty gritty of what the alignment is going to be, or, who's going to build it and when and things like that. There's a lot of support for multi-use pathways. So, I would like to see inclusion of some multi-use pathways in the TSP, just from an aspirational or a hope perspective, to kind of honor and recognize those hopes among many in our community, that they can have new places to recreate, they can have connections between their community and all kinds of things that they want to get to, work, education, school, you name it. And so just at the highest level, I would say I hope that we can have some inclusion of multi-use pathways. I also would say, because we are not building, funding, maintaining, designing these multi-use pathways ourselves as the county, we don't need to be very specific about alignments. I think it's appropriate to include a naming of multi-use pathways without a priority level, without a specific alignment or configuration or location identified either.
And I am following the vote of the Planning Commission, they said to recommend to amend it by removing the Sisters to Black Butte. It has been, ever since I've lived outside of Sisters, this has been an incredibly hot topic. And maybe you didn't count the 146 names on the petition, but I saw them. Yeah. So I feel like it just seems like it keeps being brought back up, but there's a huge contingency of people that really don't feel comfortable with it. And we have so many opportunities in this county to recreate. I don't feel like this is one we need to add. And especially considering we're not designing, building, or funding it.
So there was a proposal possibly to take the priorities off of the tables, and I'm looking at table 5.6 and 5-6, 5-7. And that was mentioned by Commissioner Chang early on, taking priorities off. So, I mean, and I would like to hear, another couple concepts here. So when we see the the word significant prior planning, which assumed a multi-use path parallel to US 20, sisters to Black Butte Ranch, priority high. Significant prior planning, is that referring to ODOT? I mean, it's not even a county project still, is it?
My understanding is there's been other coordination through the Forest Service. There's been initiations through the various agencies that would affect the land on which that community connection would be located.
Okay, so yeah, for clarity then, significant prior planning, which assumes a multi-use path parallel to US 20, is not assuming it's in the right of way of US 20, like at the edge of the, existing.
It's not clear from that description, and there's not
So it's
alignment
meant to be
proposed.
more of a generic statement.
I believe so. And just one quick note, just to your point there, Commissioner DeBonne, that priority issue area is listed as issue area number 6 on this matrix for removal of that priority column.
And that's fine. I'm just looking at the tables, kind of
Sure, sure.
big picture here. Yeah, so you broke it down into very digestible. So then previous versions of the transportation system plan of Deschutes County proper was the goal and effort of using sand on the edge of the chip seal efforts instead of gravel, right? I mean, to make it a smoother, little bit wider path on the edge of a right of way, not a state highway, but county maintained roads. And that was a point of pride just a couple of years ago. Yeah, we're making it smooth for the bike riders where we can. This is kind of taking it to a different mode, referring to these community connections, bigger projects, possibly multiple jurisdictions involved. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of what I'm seeing here. It's a bigger statement, is maybe plugged into this document where I support dialing it back a little bit. The vision of making community connections. So my point is, I guess I don't mind seeing somebody say the words, "I'd like to ride my bike from Sisters to Black Butte Ranch someday." Okay, it's probably not a project we're going to invest in. Same conclusion Commissioner Chang came in specifically. There may be crossings or support somewhere, but it's not a priority of Deschutes County to put road resources into that effort.
It's any help.
Yeah.
Inclusion of that specific path in our TSP doesn't mean it won't be constructed someday by some other group. It doesn't stop the
Yeah.
construction of that from occurring. It's just, the county lending its policy support, to providing that connection. If it leaves the TSP, it doesn't mean it's not going to be built. Likewise, if it stays in the TSP, there's a lot of other hurdles, to overcome to make that connection. So it's not a thumbs up, thumbs down. We walk away. This doesn't get done, or it does get done. It's just a philosophical support of a multi-use connection.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to emphasize again that for people who want to fight about these pathways, this is not the place to be spending your energy. This specific one we're talking about at the moment, the Sisters to Black Butte Ranch connection, it hasn't been in our TSP for the last 10, 15 years. And I've seen multiple cycles of planning, community energizing, community opposition, project, stalling out. And that was, without this project being in the TSP. So it just is not it's not the place to put your effort if you oppose one of these procedures, one of these proposed pathways. I do think that not putting it in a TSP is a little bit like just sticking your head in the sand. I mean, people are going to be fighting about this no matter what. And, if we recognize that there's a desire to have a pathway, I think it encourages people to try to do good public process to figure out how it could be built and where it could be built that would work for more people. So that's my perspective on this.
So then Black Butte Ranch is, and destination resorts are set up like this. You know, I think of it kind of as like the house, the front yard and the backyard, just a scenario. But Black Butte Ranch has public restaurants. You know, I'll ride my bike up and go get a meal, but it also has a controlled area for residences, you know, that's not open to the public. So we're not seeing Black Butte Ranch proper, the private entity of Black Butte Ranch. A lot of opinions from the people in Black Butte Ranch, you know, come say, hey, yes, we're looking forward to this path for, you know, access to summertime activities by people of the geographic area, you know, so we haven't seen that either. So I'm very sensitive to the fact that, you know, it is it's private property. So then, you know, for the city of Sisters to write a letter in such support, it's kind of a one-sided conversation. So I'm just pointing out lots of push and pull on this one.
And since I live on the other side of Sisters and I do go out to Black Butte Ranch, yes, their lodge is outstanding.
Yep.
You know, they've really done a great job and they contribute a lot to our room tax revenue. So anyway, I just see that this argument keeps going on and on and on. I just want to say, I know that the community as a whole probably would not like to see it happening. And I will suggest that we don't need to have it in ours. We can do exactly what the Planning Commission did and remove it.
I would like us to honor honor the request of the Sisters City Council. You know, Sisters is the place where people are going. You know, kids wanna get to school from outside of the city. People want to ride in and have coffee or have a meal, go to the library, do things like that. So you know, I think that the perspective of the leadership of the city of Sisters is a valid consideration in this discussion. It's, you know,
I don't think any of them live in Black Butte Ranch. So, you know, it's like,
no, they don't, but they
don't
live in the place that people want to get to from outside of the city. And you don't do that on a strip of sand next to Highway 20. I mean, that'd be incredibly dangerous to put your elementary school kid in Tollgate, you know, on the side of Highway 20 if they want to try to get into school in town.
oh, I'm so glad we started with number 2. Hey,
Good idea.
like how many days will we be here?
So in the table, it talks about a community connection, Black Butte Ranch to Camp Sherman, route required coordination with Forest Service. So then, as I say, take it a higher philosophy about it's good to maybe just put points on a map. You know, there's people here and there's people here, and there may be somebody that wants to get from here to here. So then I see this as a full package of just future possible routes. That's why when I talk about priority, you know, as I say, another item, decision item, but not getting fully engaged in who's going to put a trail where, but just naming points.
How do we, can you just remind me, how do we frame this table? I mean, do we give all these caveats like we're not designing, funding, building, maintaining these pathways. These are routes that community members have expressed interest in our community. Here they are. I mean,
and some people have opposed.
Yeah, and I mean, we can say some people have opposed, and you know, we don't want to. We're not pushing these. We're naming them as, you know, things that people in our community want. Is that basically the way that the text is?
I think that's a fair characterization of the community connections.
So then back to big picture, we call it bicycle route community connections. You know, is there a concept of multi-use paths that's coming around now, or does that mean anything to anybody?
I mean, in the context of the Sisters to Black Butte Ranch, I believe that the community connection is meant to be a type of multi-use path. Whether that the specific alignment of which is not clear at this time, but yeah, I believe that that's meant to take the physical form of a multi-use pathway.
But I'm just pointing out that, I mean, there's some interesting electric two-wheel vehicles out there that are a lot easier to commute on right now because you're not even breaking a sweat being able to go 5 or 10 miles. So that's a different world than a recreational workout on a bicycle. So, you know, that's the next step of this whole thing. So we call it bicycle facilities, but
just to back up again, we consulted BPAC as the group of citizens interested in bicycle and pedestrian mobility. And, you know, they put a lot of thought into how they could plug into the TSP process. They recognize that, you know, the county is not in this business of crafting multi-use paths. What they really valued was the connectivity between communities in light of things just like that, of, you know, with electric bikes and this and that. The reach of, you know, the radius of use expands out quite a bit. I may not be willing to ride my 10-speed 10 miles, but my electric bike, you know, that puts that facility in a different light. And so they were very reasonable, I think, in working with us to identify, you know, community connections with the goal of obtaining board support towards that, without necessarily, you know, identifying how those are going to happen. But giving them the ability to work with ODOT, lend support to, you know, other entities that may want to pursue, you know, multi-use paths inside the state highway right of way, outside the state highway right of way, providing general, you know, community connections. And that was the whole, you know, impetus behind, you know, this chapter, this table was really, you know, just that group of folks we tasked with bike and ped advocacy, you know, jumping in and lending their support to, you know, the transportation system plan.
So, you know, we did start off with number 2, kind of a yes or no question. I would conclude yes to keep it, but as I say, the proposal will be to reconfigure the table and maybe not priorities here, you know, so as I say, maybe we get back to this and.
So go back up to number 1 then? Is that what you're saying?
And work for other items too, yeah.
I mean, before we leave too, I would support that to keep it in the table, take the priority column out.
And so just to kind of clarify what I've just heard, it sound like there's 2 at least for supporting retaining this community connection. And then I did hear sort of a add-on that we might go to the priority column. I might address that at a later issue area if that's okay. But for just this issue area, is it accurate to say we have Commissioner Chang and Commissioner DeBone voting yes to retain the existing language of that community connection and Chair Adair voting no? Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. And of course, yeah, happy to go into whichever issue area next if you'd like to do
Go to number 1 now.
Sure, that sounds great. I
mean, I would just like to be able to ride my horse a mile down the road at my house. And I honestly, I don't even think I can do that anymore because people are going so fast.
Sure.
So yeah, we did lose our huge buck last summer because somebody hit him. Remember, Chris, I had to call you. I couldn't believe it. It's really unfortunate, but yeah, you know, it's an interesting world out there. Faster is better. And a lot of electric bikes are really, but then again, I'd love to see Lower Bridge done, you know, and how long is that going to take? You know, widening for bikes because there are so many people that go by on their pedaling bikes.
I might just point out one connection here between issue area 1 and 2, because we have voted essentially now to include at least one community connection in the form of multi-use pathway. It kind of nullifies the first issue area. This first issue area is asking about a full prohibition on all multi-use pathways, but what we've just done is approved at least one of those pathways. So I just wanted to point that out in terms of kind of a logic flow before we dove too deep on issue area number 1.
So does that mean we're going to 3?
I'd be happy to.
support that decision and that conclusion, just like you're saying. So there would be no prohibition on paths in the transportation system plan. So.
And I would support moving on as well, but I do want to make one comment about wildlife habitat fragmentation. So, through my work with the Deschutes Collaborative Forest Project, through connections, and discussions with the Deschutes Trails Coalition, there is a lot of community focus and citizen research happening right now around the impacts of trails and pathways on wildlife habitat. And so I asked a number of these folks about kind of the to try to help me understand what kind of impacts a paved pathway next to a major highway would have. And most of the people I spoke to, some of them, PhD wildlife biologists, said to me, when you take a big piece of core habitat, unfragmented core habitat, and you put a trail through it, that has real impacts. Animals are disturbed by runners, cyclists, equestrians, other folks who are going through that chunk of core habitat. But putting a paved pathway right next to a major highway really is not a significant additional impact because the impact of that highway is already so significant. So I just want to say to folks who brought up the concern of impacts on wildlife migration that a paved pathway next to a highway is not that much of an additional impact. A paved pathway and through the middle of a core, undisturbed habitat area, that would be a huge impact. And we need to separate the two in the way that we think about trails and pathways.
I might just clarify just to really kind of cleanly move on from issue area number one. It sounded like Commissioner Bone was saying that in agreement with sort of my characterization of the flow of things that no, we'd be answering no. And so the board would retain existing language related to multi-use pathways. And it sounds like Commissioner Chang is agreeing that there would be no prohibition as well. I'd be interested to hear any thoughts the chair had as well. I just didn't want to leave out any other discussion.
I'm not against all pathways. I have specific things that I worry about. So not all. But then again, when the statement that Commissioner Chang just made about the pathway and if it's next to Highway 97, but what about if people have their dog with them and, a lot of dogs run off leash and then they take off and go through, what happens there? Are there signs that, no, your dog has to be on a leash when you're on this pathway? So I've seen what dogs do to deer. And the good news is my neighborhood alfalfa field that when 14, I believe it had about 25 deer in it. It's now up to 20. So to me, that's a really good sign that they are still finding that wonderful field to eat at in the winter. So always counting the deer out there. And but when you see so many are being hit by cars, because you get the calls, don't you?
Call to pick it up and then a call to complain about it for sure.
Yeah. What, that it was hit or that you didn't pick it up?
Well, we always pick them up. So yeah, I mean, the public certainly has concerns about wildlife strikes in the roadway system. And that's an issue we're hearing a lot more about. And
then my contact with that's working for ODOT had been picking him up and he just couldn't believe how many he was picking up. So yeah, it's, you have to slow down. So
thank you very much, commissioners. It sounds like we're all in support of retaining the multi-use pathway, not imposing a prohibition on all multi-use pathways in the county. And with that, I'd be happy to move to any next issue area you may be interested in.
So number 3?
That'd be fine with me. If that's what the rest of the board would like to do, the issue area number 3 reads that should the board include a conceptual community connection multi-use pathway in the updated TSP between Baker Road and Lava Butte. This is very similar to the Sisters Black Butte Ranch, but now this is a different location, different segment of a multi-use pathway. The Planning Commission did deliberate on this issue area, and they ultimately made a recommendation to amend the TSP by changing the location of the proposed Baker Road Lava Butte multi-use pathway to the west side of Highway 97 rather than the east side. This is at the discretion of the board again, but we just want to point out that this project has gone through significant preliminary planning phases undertaken by ODOT. And a lot of these, this is very similar in terms of like this was proposed by an advocacy group by BPAC, a very similar type of, or has some support behind it from those types of voices and things like that. But this is an ODOT project. It would be a multi-use pathway originally planned on the east side. PC recommended it be on the west side. So sort of following that Planning Commission recommendation, the main question for the board is whether they would like to uphold that Planning Commission recommendation or not. If the board votes yes, they would like to uphold that recommendation, then they can incorporate that recommendation from the Planning Commission to move that multi-use pathway to the west side of Highway 97 rather than the east side. If the board declines to take up the Planning Commission's exact recommendation, then they can just retain the existing language, the existing description of that multi-use pathway between Baker Road and Lava Butte. Third option is if the board disagrees with both the Planning Commission's recommendation and the existing language in the updated TSP draft. And in that case, then the board may vote to remove the conceptual multi-use pathway community connection between Baker Road and Lava Butte from the draft TSP document.
Do we have any comments?
What table is that in? I guess I'm trying to look back at the document itself.
Sure. So that's in table 5,
Page
5-6.
5-4.
5-4. Excuse me.
15.
Thank you.
Okay,
This
backwards a little bit.
This description, is this the description route currently in design as a multi-use path along US 97 would connect Bend, Lava Lands, and Sun River? That's all we say at this currently. So there's not a specific alignment description in here.
That's correct. As proposed right now in the draft TSP document, it's very nondescript. It's basically the ODOT project name and the points it's connecting.
Yeah. Especially reflecting on the land use determination that was just being discussed earlier today. I don't think we should be making any comments about alignments of in specific locations of this trail, and I think that just naming it is plenty.
Well, and I come to that conclusion too, as to say, having that previous declaratory ruling, understand it's a right of way, existing right of way. If you look at the map, you pull up dial, this is going to be in the right of way one way or the other. So I don't come to a conclusion that we should specify which side of the highway it should be on.
Very good. And of course, thoughts from the chair.
And you want my comments?
Of course, if you have any thoughts, yeah.
Oh, I have lots of thoughts. All
Sure.
right. Yes. Considering what's going on in China Hat, considering that we've had 15 fires since January 1st, I know that the sheriff's office wasn't even very happy about the fact of doing this pathway. So that's a consideration, which I don't know if it's noted here or not, but how many homeless do we have out in China Hat? How impacted has that neighborhood been? And moving it on the other side of Highway 97 could be, still gives people the pathway, but it definitely may help take China Hat out of the mix. So I'm all by myself again.
And not to characterize it that way, but
No, but I'm happy doing that because
Sure.
I have been dealing with China Hat since 2019 and I've seen what's happened there. And I just feel like, okay, if we move the pathway over on the other side, it might take some of the pressure off the people coming out of China Hat and going down that pathway with their dogs.
So if the sheriff's theory is correct that this pathway will become a conduit for homeless people, do you really want to be loading all those folks into Deschutes River Woods instead? I mean, I don't think that the sheriff's theory is correct. That's the key thing. But if it
Well,
is,
you have your opinions and that's
if it is
lovely,
correct,
but I have mine. So
if it is correct, then would it make sense for us to run along the east side of the Deschutes River Woods side of the highway and bring, serve as a conduit for homelessness into that neighborhood? I mean, is that?
Well, should we go to the real root? The state has spent 1.2 billion on homeless, and we now have 22% more homeless. So I know that this is going to take a while to be implemented. I just would like to give that neighborhood a break.
As would I. And that's why I'm advocating for us to do things every day.
Thank you very much, commissioners. It sounds like there were Commissioners Chang and DeBone were in favor of just retaining the existing language of the draft TSP, and it sounded like Chair Adair was in favor of upholding the Planning Commission's recommendation to move it to the east side. To the west side. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Tarek.
Very much appreciated. All right, and that's issue number 3. We can move to whichever other issue areas you may be interested in deliberating on next.
Number 4.
Sure. Happy to go into number 4. So this is another, we've received a lot of comments about this particular proposal, but not really during the Planning Commission phase. I would say this sort of popped up more during when the board's review was initiated. So the main framing of the issue area for the board today is, should the board support inclusion by reference of the Bend Parks and Rec District master plan within the updated TSP document, including a bridge connecting the Deschutes River Woods neighborhood to the west side of the Deschutes River. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission did not deliberate on this issue, but we just wanted to note that this decision, again, is at the discretion of the board, but that there's no contemplation really by the road department of adding this to their capital improvements project or capital improvement plan, excuse me. So really the question for the board today is, should we retain a reference to this project through referencing the BPRD master plan through this TSP, or if there is no interest in including that reference, should we remove references to the BPRD master plan?
Remind me again what the vote was. Wasn't it like 92-2 or something?
It was, I believe, 89-2. Let me check really quick here.
You mean
right?
Right. This one was 89, and then these are record submittals. Lots of different other agencies referenced and signatures and things like that. There were 89 record submittals in support and 2 that were in opposition for this footbridge proposal.
Okay. So Chris, I know that the community would love to have this bridge. Who do they get to fund it?
This is on the Bend Parks and Rec master plan.
Oh, it's on their plan.
Just to clarify, board, just so this is clear, this is not a project we have explicitly identified in any table in the TSP. This is a project that's identified in the Bend Parks and Rec master plan, which we have included in the TSP basically as an appendix or by reference. This is not a project we're explicitly identifying in any table in the capital improvement plan in the TSP.
Thank you, Cody.
So the real question is, do we want to make reference to the Bend Parks and Rec master plan in our comprehensive county TSP or not?
Gosh, what do you think?
To be more specific to your question, this bridge project was included in a voter bond measure, a ballot measure years ago. I can't even remember how long ago.
It was a long time ago.
It was approved by the the voters within the Bend Park and Rec District. And the Park and Rec District has essentially sat on those funds since that point in time, because there was a great deal of controversy around the project at an earlier point.
Yes.
But so the Park and Rec District should have the funds to, well, at least they should have the funds to implement, to pay for the project as it was scoped a while back. Who knows whether that those same dollars are going to buy you half a bridge now or a full bridge.
So it sounds like technically we really shouldn't have this in our plan.
Well, again, what I'm saying is we are not explicitly identifying this project in the TSP in terms of any of our project tables. There's reference to the Bend Parks and Rec Master Plan in our TSP, and the Bend Parks and Rec Master Plan includes this project. So I don't know that it's necessarily clear to us how we would exclude that one specific project without just entirely excluding the Bend Parks and Rec Master Plan. But this was, again, during the comment period, this was a topic brought up by the public. So
I support including that Bend Park and Rec Master Plan by reference. As I say, I got the call years ago. It's like, you guys did this and they're going to put a bridge. I'm like, what do? We have a reference to somebody else's transportation plan in there. So as I say, I'm not fully invested in that geographic area as a resident, but the people that are really get wound up on this topic. But I support just keeping that reference to that document in ours.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I mean, I would also support inclusion by reference, and if my fellow commissioners wanted to take a step further and explicitly mention this project somewhere, it does have a great deal of community support. It is just outside the urban growth boundary of the city of Bend, so it's in terms of land use authority, or kind of whose jurisdiction it's Bend Park and Rec District doesn't have any land use authority, so it is really it's not the city of Bend's, it's the county's. But I'm happy to just support by inclusion, support inclusion by reference to the master plan. That's fine.
Sounds like a win.
And any further thoughts from the chair or any other? I've noted too, Commissioner Chang and Commissioner DeBone in support of retaining that existing reference.
Chris, I was wondering, did you have any, besides Cody, did you have any feedback on this?
No, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. This has been something that the public has crafted a lightning rod out of.
Clamoring for.
And so we're dealing with, I think a lot of confusion over what's in or not in this proposal. And it's simply, as Cody mentioned, we're adopting it by reference. Our intention is not to move on any aspect of this.
Okay.
So by adopting it by reference, it's taken a not opposition position. I mean, if somebody's going to go through the process and get the authority to put a bridge over a waterway just outside the city of Bend,
we're supporting.
Please proceed.
Bend Parks did in their process, and it's other trail connections as well. So it's.
So do you remember how much they allocated for it?
I do not. No.
Okay.
Again, this is brought.
I know it's way out
outside of the process into it here, and
well, let's hope that money has been well invested so that it's bigger than it was.
See.
It's fine. Thank you, Tarek.
Sure. Very good. All right. Appreciate the thoughts on issue area number 4. And happy to proceed. However else we have 4 more issue areas as drafted on the matrix today.
Let's go to 5.
Sure. That sounds great. This is again something that came out of kind of extensive sequence of public comments from a sort of a region specific area in the county. This issue area deals with, or just framed, should the board include language in the updated TSP responsive to concerns regarding local access roads or LARs in Special Road District number 1 which is Three Rivers area roughly, including replacement of a canal crossing on Island Loop Way. The Planning Commission did not deliberate on this issue area and made no recommendation. The County Road Department has worked individually with a lot of these individual commenters, clarifying the role of Special Road District Number 1 and their responsibility for the improvements and maintenance projects on Island Loop Way and the surrounding area within that road district's boundaries. And so per statute, we're not liable for failure to improve or repair a local access road. And we're actually legally restricted from expending funds on those LARs unless there's emergency circumstances. There's not been any of those emergency circumstances identified in association with Island Loop Way or other infrastructure down in Special Road District 1. And so as a result, it's really the only factor I would put in there is that the road department doesn't see there's any legal way to move forward with being responsive to some of those requests because it's within a special road district.
So this is constant community discussion for some of these places that have the unmaintained rural roads. It fits into the land use pattern back in the day. Map was put in place and it says this is a public right of way, but it's not under maintenance, and it's just always been like that. We do have quite a subset of these developed areas like that. People living on unmaintained roads and now bridges, and bridges is coming up more and more these days. But I support, holding and being real clear about the position of the county. We're not going to be able to spend our road maintenance dollars. And when I have the conversation with folks, I say, Huntington Road in Southern Deschutes County, State Rec, and South Century, pay attention. These are in pretty good shape, and we keep those as arterials and collectors. So it's a conversation, but I don't support changing any words here.
And just to clarify, it is in a special road district. So it is maintained through, the district establishment.
Well, yeah. So, and I think of the bigger picture, some are and some aren't. So I'm referring to that concept. Yep.
I would also not support this change.
So that's an if no.
Sure.
Three.
It sounds like two no's then, or at least two.
Three.
Sure. Very good. Appreciate the clarification. I might just add that many of the additional sort of nuances of the comment were relating to larger comprehensive planning initiatives for that sort of sensitive designated place of Three Rivers. And that was largely kind of taken up by our long range planning division. That might be something that's subject to like a Newberry Country plan update at the future if the board was into that. That wouldn't be under the road department's direction, but that's one direction that some of these comments took, is that we really did see a need for some kind of comprehensive planning in that region.
And I'm involved with some of those conversations. And when I have a phone call on the topic, I just keep going. Let's talk. So they really understand the big picture.
Sure. Very good. Appreciate it, commissioners.
If I could just ask, I don't want to distract us too long, but background question. Is there an extensive system of irrigation canals up in this area?
I wouldn't call this an irrigation canal. I think it's a recreational water canal that creates kind of canal front property.
Okay.
As a feeder from the Deschutes.
It's just backwater loops of the Little Deschutes.
Okay. And is this the other
Maybe
background question is this one of the bridges that was analyzed as no? Okay.
Because it's in a special road district.
Got it.
Specifically.
Got it. Okay.
And because presently it's not a bridge, it's a causeway with a culvert underneath it.
Got it. Okay.
A culvert. Okay.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, commissioners. With issue area number 5 complete, we could move to issue area numbers 6, 7, or 8, whatever the preference would be for the board. 6 is the priority one we had talked about earlier.
So table 5.6 or 5-6 and 5-7 is my only thought when I look at this.
And that's a really good point of clarification. I as maybe just a verbal amendment to the description of this issue area, I would include table 5-7 as well within this review. It's basically the same connections, but they were referred to as recreation connections.
I'd support that.
Sure. And again, this is pretty much taken from board feedback. So the planning commission did not deliberate on this. We don't really have any citizen comments related to this. So that's very great. Commissioner Chang in support to remove the priority column, sounds like.
I support that.
as
It's
well as-
fine.
Sure. And 3 in support. So we will be removing that priority and setting no priority for both tables 5-6 and 5-7. Thank you very much, board. Issue areas 7 and 8 really just relate to specific comments that were addressing very specific line item projects in terms of their priority status. These are not within tables 5-6 and they are not within 5-6 and 5-7. And so just because of our last deliberative point, there's no effect of that on there still would be a priority status with these tables that are referenced in issue area number 7. This is basically a comment issued by ODOT related to projects S9 and S11 as identified on page 47 of the draft TSP. The planning commission did deliberate on this issue area. They ultimately decided to recommend adoption of those proposed language. This had some very clerical sort of edits that ODOT had proposed, but also they were suggesting priority status changes, and ultimately the planning commission recommended that we adopt the proposed language changes, and as a result, increase those priority statuses. And so again, this is sort of at the discretion of the board, but the way that ODOT has framed this recommendation is in the board decision point column right there near the top, where S9 is basically just being recommended to have a bump in priority status from low to high. S11 is recommended to have the same from low to high, but then also with a change in some of the project description, basically noting that the project with contributions from Deschutes County, City of Sisters, and ODOT is funded for construction in 2024.
So it might go up to high then, mightn't it?
If I could jump in, that project has been awarded. We've already wrote our check. It's been cashed.
The check is cashed.
Yes. So it's, this is an as-built, so to speak. Just, and the TSP was drafted, 4 years ago. Our partnership hadn't been contemplated yet through the course of development of the TSP. We brought the board and IGA with ODOT and City of Sisters made that $1 million contribution to help leverage that project. So, no matter what you do, there's no going back on that one.
If we make it high, then we can take credit for getting more of our high priority projects.
Perfect.
Well, it is amazing that it is going to be done this quickly.
Absolutely.
But the backup in Sisters some days is an issue.
A lot of the reason why is ODOT was able to gather the funding through the partnership with the city and Deschutes County. So absolutely.
It's good.
Can you remind me about S9, the Powell Butte Highway US 20 route? Where is that? What is that?
It's
I was trying to
intersection improvements at Powell Butte Highway in US 20 east of Bend, where Powell Butte Highway connects to.
So the next roundabout out from Ward Hamby, and then you'd be hitting the next one.
Correct. And again,
I didn't have it in my head for a few moments there. Okay.
ODOT, it's just as staff commentary. ODOT's not initiated any sort of process with us to want to even explore improvements there, which kind of takes it out of the high range. It takes about 5 years to, go from, contemplation to completion. And so, already, I think it's probably not a high project. It's a medium at best. And it was proposed to be a low in the TSP, which is a 10-year plus type project. So
over on the other side on 126, and Powell Butte, is anything going to ever happen there? Because that's where I really see a lot of dangerous situations.
So that's in Kirk County.
I know it's Kirk County. Well, do I have to add?
And I know
Do I have to ask Judge Crawford?
I think so. I think that's a conversation with Kirk County and ODOT for that intersection. I know that's a top priority for Kirk County. And then I'd like to think, we're helping, show partnership, gets projects completed by having a little skin in the game on some of these intersections, just like we did it at Ward Hamby and Highway 20. You know,
But that's Crook County, so we can't help.
that's correct. Yep.
We just, well, I'm hoping that ODOT is listening because that's really a dangerous left turn if you're trying to get on 126. And there's there's the equestrian center there. There are so many horse trailers. It's constantly being used, and it would just be so much safer.
It speaks to how Powell Butte Highway has become a commuter route and the amount of traffic we have on that facility, the project we're doing right now at Butler Market and Powell Butte Highway. So it's absolutely, I think recognized by all stakeholders to be necessary.
So Ward Hamby, you guys had all kinds of data to indicate why Ward Hamby was such an important safety project to implement. Is this, that Powell Butte Highway, Highway 20 intersection, is that similarly dangerous place, safety concern, or?
I would say no. And off the top of my head, it hasn't had near the number or severity of crashes as Ward Hamby did. It has a left turn pocket. For the most part, the flow doesn't conflict with each other, right? You're going eastbound, turning left, conflicting with southbound, turning right. And so it's kind of that first, intersection that has traffic in it since you left the city of Burns, and so, that's why it probably has, some safety concerns, some, certainly ODOT is concerned about it. But again, we have not been, there hasn't been a project that we've been contacted in by the state to participate in just yet. I know they want to see us elevate this, meaning it's probably imminent at some point. But just from our perspective, calling it a high project when we haven't had any conversations about a specific improvement just yet, probably is a little premature. I think it's more of a medium or potentially even low, but board's discretion. It's not going to sway the funding of how the dollars are coming in and out of the CIP, how we have that structured. It's just solely, honoring ODOT's request or modifying it.
Given actual progress to date, I would support medium or possibly keeping it low. I think medium is appropriate. So I guess, you could put me down for, high for S11 and medium for S9.
Sure. I'll go with that also.
Very good. And any thoughts from the chair?
I would leave it at a high
Leave it as high
for the first S9, and the other one, of course, is going to be built. So I guess you could say it's high too.
So you would vote for high on both. Okay.
Yes.
So it looks like we have a majority of the board voting for a medium status on project S9. And then and then unanimous approval for a high status for S11. Is that correct?
Which means nothing because it's already being built.
Correct.
Let's be realistic here.
Well, it's an accurate reflection of how much of a priority it was.
All right. Thank you very much, commissioners. And now we are to the last issue area on the matrix today. Similar to the last issue area, this deals with priority status for a specific project. In this case, this is related to project BP-3 related to 2nd Street and Cook Avenue sidewalk improvements in Tumalo. And the question for the board is, should the board adopt the citizen comment recommendation to include a high priority category associated with that project? The Planning Commission deliberated on the issue area and recommended that they adopt the proposed priority change for a high status. And so it's ultimately the discretion of the board here, but it would be essentially a yes or no to changing this from a medium to a high priority status.
Is there any thoughts from?
I think one thing important to note, this was based on a single public comment that the Planning Commission received. The commission decided to take some action on it, but
Yeah, yeah. And so we're mostly trying to reflect the planning commission's thought. Any of those recommendations are really central to what the board has to review in addition to the public and agency comments. So that's a lot of the framing, correct? It's correct what Cody was saying. It was a very limited number that prompted this issue area, but the planning commission did take it up and made a recommendation. So that's what we're reviewing today.
I think this project lends itself to a safe routes to school application or, other funding tied towards, improving pedestrian connectivity to school areas. We're studying that with our transportation safety action plan update that's being scoped right now and federally funded through the.
So if it goes to high, does that help one of those applications? No.
Not necessarily, no. I mean, realistically, this kind of project is 5 to 10 years out or more. Medium to staff would be an appropriate priority level for it.
Yeah, I support medium still on that effort. And then if there's big bunch of money from Safe Routes Schools, it could move around obviously, and it'll be in the queue of projects. If you look at all the other sidewalk type projects in that list, we'll build them as we can.
But I mean, if we tag this as high, would it mean that county road staff, community partners, we're acknowledging the urgency that they feel, and I mean, maybe for county road staff, it means we'll give it that much more focus.
Yeah, I mean, if you say it's high, then it's high to us. And that's it. I mean, we did make improvements recently in Tumalo, substantial, the undercrossing, pet undercrossing, sidewalk improvements on leading up to and around that. So I mean, this is on our radar. We have the path we think that gets us to funding to do something. Realistically, it's like Cody said, in that time frame, but to the degree that the board wants to call it high, it certainly will resonate with us.
I'm in Tumalo almost every day. Yeah, I see that community doing so many things, and it's a great spot for people that live here to go out and eat at the Bite, etc. And the more upgrades, because they're not incorporated, we can do to the community, I think it's really beneficial. I think all that funding comes back, and it's a headache, but it's clearly will be goodwill at some point in time.
And maybe just to clarify to the board, we're not specifically talking about changing the priority level to filling any sidewalk gaps in Tumalo. This was just specific to one area. We do have other sidewalk projects identified in Tumalo that do have a high priority placed on them in the TSP as proposed. So that includes the sidewalk on both sides of 7th Street between US 20 and Cook Avenue. There's still a little bit of a gap there. 4th Street between Wood Avenue and Bruce Avenue. Excuse me. So those were both identified as high priority projects in the TSP as proposed.
So isn't it cheaper to do them all at the same time?
Well, that depends. Specific to the project we're talking about, if there's Safe Routes to School money available for that segment, which Safe Routes to School will not be available for those other segments we're talking about, then maybe not.
Okay.
I was to say, when I look at the table and I see these other projects, those are going to be tangible, the commercial area, the walking downtown area, Cook Avenue and Bruce Avenue, Wood Avenue. That's why, I support keeping the others, Safe Route to School future project at medium, knowing that it'll be in the mix, but keeping the other two high, and let's go build them when we can.
Definitely. Tumalo, I think it warrants the attention. So I don't know, what did you?
I could go with high on this.
Okay.
I absolutely want to keep focus high on those other two projects in Tumalo, and identifying this one too, just makes the overall, I believe gives a little bit more overall attention to Tumalo and pedestrian improvements there. But I'd like to see it high, but I'm not, that's not a really strong you know, that I can go either way on this.
Okay.
I like making the whole community up, the sidewalks high.
Hi, sure.
Yeah.
Um,
I know Chris will write that down
The guidance.
and go like, okay,
And so just to clarify on our final issue area, it sounds like the majority, 2 out of 3 of the commissioners are voting to change the priority status from medium to high on project BP-3. If that's correct. Very good. Thank you very much, commissioners. We're not, if you have any other thoughts, that was the matrix, but happy to entertain any other deliberative thoughts you might have, any other red lines or edits you have in mind. We could also go into next steps if you're interested.
I just kind of wanted to bring it up again. I'm still kind of curious why we reopened the record when we received a letter from someone who clearly would know what our deadline was. It just seems, when I think about it, it seems a bit unusual.
Sure, I think so. We do. I mean, I receive stuff outside of the open record period all the time. This is what happened basically, is that we received several 3 or 4 letters that were after the record, significantly so, after the record closed. When those were presented to legal counsel and sent directly to the board, there was some question about whether those were whether the board was interested in including those in record, whether there was some procedural sensitivity around having those sent directly to the commissioners. And ultimately, it was the decision of the board to reopen the record, just to incorporate those comments, was my understanding, that were received late. But we do receive late comments pretty regularly, I would say.
I know they have to get input by 4 p.m.
4 p.m. now.
So yes, and we try and repeat that all the time. So,
Sure.
okay, thank you for re-clarifying that decision.
A couple thoughts. So I want to thank the planning commission for getting into this. Obviously it was interesting. A couple topics just pop right up out of there. People get real engaged. But once again, big capital projects out there. This is the kind of that 20-year window, probably going to update it every 10 years. So, you know, what are we going to do in the near future? Also getting back into the legislative session, and the guidance by the the gas tax and the funding for counties is going to be very important. If you think about city of Bend, and I don't know how many cities are doing this, if they're doing transportation utility fee and they're doing local bonds for transportation, and the state needs to cover their costs, we could be left out in the middle wondering, hey, wait a minute, what happened to the system that we were utilizing to fund these projects? So it could get real interesting next year in 2025. So yeah, let's all get up to speed on that and make sure that, these community connectors, our trails and collectors between the cities are going to be maintained in the future.
And let's hope that we don't have the issue where we're told that ODOT isn't going to fund keeping the mountains clean, especially that I just honestly cannot believe that we were told that they weren't going to do anything on the passes. I mean, let's create another whatever emergency. So yeah, let's hope they've learned their lesson this year. Nick?
I'm sorry.
I mean, I'd also just like to thank all parties involved on county staff's end for working this plan through the process. There are great safety projects in here. There's great projects that are going to provide mobility and get people to where they need to go. Smoother, more efficiently, faster, safer. So thank you for your work in putting this together, and it'll be really exciting to see these projects moving forward in the years to come.
Thank you, Commissioner. I also want to point out Matt Kittleson with the Kittleson Associates is back here, put in the lion's share of work on this on behalf of that firm, and so they did a great job, and want to recognize them as well.
Well, thank you, Matt. And I just want to point out that people need to drive a little slower, so we lose fewer wildlife. What is it? The city of Bend loses 100, the county picks up 400, and then I believe it was like, what, 600, 1,100 from the state. So it was like 1,100 total. So, and per my person, he thinks it's way higher than 600 that ODOT picks up, just from his experience. So people, please be aware, our deer are crossing. My husband almost hit a deer in Eagle Crest the other night. Because it was right there. So that would have been a really sad dinner party. Anyhow, go slower. Thank you all. Thank you, Cody.
Commissioners, just to clarify, and I don't mean to get ahead of legal counsel, but the second item here is conduct deliberations, or if the board concludes deliberations, then the board could choose to move adoption today with the decisions that were made, and then you would bring back the final decision at a later date. But it kind of it would then conclude this piece of it. But again, I don't mean to get ahead of legal.
That was what I was going to say.
Who's going to come on it? Yeah.
So would a motion just be moved to adopt the TSP update with amendments as described today? Is that?
That would be sufficient.
I'll move to adopt the TSP update with amendments as described today.
And I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Chang,
Yes.
Mr. DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Whoa, wait.
Thank you, Tariq.
Microphone. Great job. At a very, thank you. And at a future date, we'll work with Kittleson and put those edits in place. We'll bring back sort of a final draft for a first reading and ordinance, and then a second reading following sort of a similar process for monumenting. And that'll be at a future date to be determined. It'll be after our edits, so I'll have to get you a date after we're done kind of working with the consultant. But thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
And I appreciate your expertise. Okay, other items? Mr. Chang, do you want to share with us your trip?
Yeah, I'd be happy to share a little bit about the NACO conference and also my visits with Senators Merkley and Wyden. And I visited with Senator Merkley, met with Senator Wyden's staff, and met with Representative Chavez DeReamer's staff. A lot of the discussion was around what Congress can do to support the creation of more affordable housing in our community, either through congressionally directed spending allocations or just by ensuring that there's stable funding for programs like the HUD Pro Housing Program, community development block grants, low-income housing tax credits, fundamental pieces of the capital stack to get housing, the housing that our community needs built in the community. So a lot of discussion around that. I did brainstorm with the congressional staff some about how we can steward our groundwater, both the levels of our aquifer and the quality of our aquifers. Made a specific plug for increased appropriations for the Wolf Livestock Demonstration Grant Program. That's the federal end of the funding that will be flowing through our Depredation Compensation and Financial Assistance Committee, because the state has been dialing up its investment and the feds haven't been keeping up. I learned some things about a kind of large solar siting process on Bureau of Land Management lands that is happening across the Western United States. One of the projects identified, a potential project identified that's kind of, I think, pretty high on the list is south of the Redmond Airport, west of Pronghorn, east of Highway 97, not far from the BLM land site that we were talking about as a potential landfill location, and very large scale, hundreds of acres. A utility scale project. And definitely had some discussions about other things that can be done to promote workforce housing, creation of workforce housing, and behavioral health as well. There's a lot of behavioral health discussion, but there weren't specific things for me to ask for when I was in DC. So a lot of talk about behavioral health. That was most of it. Happy to answer any questions.
I did notice that I think the number of cattle in the country is down to levels from like maybe 1951. So cattle prices are going way up apparently because of the lack of inventory in our country.
The drought of the last couple of years has really reduced the amount of the amount of livestock that people are carrying or have carried in the last couple of years.
Commissioner DeBonne, do you have anything?
Yesterday, Sun River Lapine Economic Development meeting, so that was well attended. Just a roundtable about getting some buildings built. Private investor plus the legislature provided some money to build an incubator building, so they're working through that process. The Sun River Lapine Economic Development annual meeting is a month or two from now, I guess 2 months from now or whatever. But so that was discussed, kind of setting up for that. Just like the EDCO lunch, these things are well attended right now. People are looking for guidance and thoughts about what the future is and who's doing what. So that'll be well attended a couple months from now. Also yesterday afternoon, the State Interoperability Executive Council. So remember, this is kind of the statewide public safety, Oregon emergency managers, sheriffs, police, fire folks talking about the status of radios and intercommunication during non-standard operations, when things get overwhelmed, and how are you going to step out and ask for your next agency over or statewide support. So that's kind of the concepts that happen there. There's a 2-year implementation plan being worked on right now in that domain. So those are a couple of the meetings I attended in the last few days.
Okay. We did have the Fair Association meeting Monday night. It seems to be going extremely well. The team is totally ready for the 24 fair, and Dan Mooney was there asking for some help with his funding program. He has so much to do, and he's looking for a couple volunteers. If you haven't heard from somebody and you'd like to volunteer to help our fair, Dan Mooney definitely needs you, and he'd love to have maybe a couple people that would commit to like 3 years. So that was great. And I had the privilege yesterday of meeting with Ashley Smith, who is working with women on parole. She's working with them at Turning Point, at Shepherd's House, at Dawn's House. She is offering an amazing program on a hand up to women who definitely need some direction. She has a great program, and she's got a couple opportunities for us to see what she is working on. So it's a program I'm hoping we can do more of it in Central Oregon. Yeah, she happens to be a Georgia Bulldog, so she loves what she does. She does work only with women, but she's kind of like Rick is on the other side. She seems to do a really great job. So it was a pleasure to get to meet her.
Thank you. Commissioners, we received the annual dues for the Association of Oregon Counties in the amount of $72,888.05. And so we're seeking your approval to pay that invoice. And just for reference, last year, our general fund dues were $69,417.19.
So yeah, with the Association of Oregon Counties, I'm real pleased with their legislative lobbying efforts. A lot of great relationships. They're working real hard in coordination with all the counties, 36 counties, 120 elected commissioners, a lot of egos and opinions in the room. But it really seems to be flowing well these days. And I am involved with the legislative committee at this time for this short session. We met, a week and a half ago on Monday. This is lobbying efforts as well as camaraderie with other counties around the state. As I say, it's a commitment. $70,000 is quite a bit of money, but as I say, we're getting many personnel for that amount. So I'm supportive of paying that bill.
It's actually a 5% raise. Interesting. Yes, they definitely are. And I also was on the call yesterday morning with Senator Finley, and Gina has been on those calls every Tuesday. They have one. So it's great to have her part of that. And some of the people that have been brought into those discussions have been outstanding. So do we need a motion to pay the bill?
Probably just a general agreement. It's within my spending authority, but I just.
Oh, okay.
As long as there's agreement to pay, I think that's.
Yeah, no
Good.
motions necessary. You can pay it.
All right. Oh, good. Well, let's pay the bill.
I would say that AOC staff provide tremendous service and value to both Deschutes County and other counties around the state. I think this is an appropriate investment to support that capacity at AOC.
Thank you. That's my only.
That's your only one? Do we have any other executive session?
We do not.
Okay, so, all right, let's hope we get our 10 to 20 inches on the passes and the mountain because everyone.
Not at your house?
Not at my, well, no, we could have another because
So we'll
we need
be
33 inches a
Monday's
year.
Holiday, so.
Yes,
Wednesday, we-
yes. Our meeting will be the following Wednesday at 9 a.m. So thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen.